Chapter 188. Dean took the military newspaper that was handed by old Feline. He quickly glanced through it and saw the news about the Huey assassination. The magistrate had sent 4 punishers to collect the fingerprints left on the rope. The real evil culprit was about to surface. Dudian was startled as he glanced at the title. Fingerprints on the rope? Fingerprints are a unique symbol. Everyone has a different one. Old Feline said as he saw Dudian's expression, but don't worry. It was raining at that time, so it should be washed away. They shouldn't have found the key evidence. They just want to blackmail the murderer through the news so that the murderer will destroy the rope. Dudian shook his head and laughed. The magistrate is really interesting. I acted as a coachman at that time, although I touched the horse rope, but Huey's carriage was relatively ordinary. The horse rope was made of thick linen rope, not leather. You may not know, but fingerprints are basically impossible to identify on the cloth, especially with the technology they have mastered to collect fingerprints. Old Feline was surprised, so that's how it is. No wonder I sometimes see people from the magistrate wearing gloves when they investigate the murder scene. I thought it was because they don't want to dirty the scene. I didn't expect it to be like this. Dudian smiled. This was common sense in the old era. But in this era of information congestion, not many people knew about it. Old Feline was an aristocrat who enjoyed wine and wealth. He wouldn't think about these things. The magistrate's action was undoubtedly like what old Feline had said. It was difficult to solve the case, so they wanted to blackmail the murderer through the news. The murderer would certainly pay attention to the progress of the investigation of the Huey's assassination. If he saw the news, he would be scared and even want to destroy the evidence. At that time, the 4 punishers would be waiting for him by the rope. The power of the magistrate's punishers was extremely strong. Even a senior hunter might not be able to escape from them. That was why the hunters were so powerful but were obedient to the aristocracy. They had to follow the rules. In history, there have been some wild hunters who were killed by the magistrate's punishers. Moreover, in addition to the magistrate's punishers, the Holy Church's military force was not inferior to the magistrates. This was one of the main reasons why, although the hunters were strong, they could only live under the command of the nobles and act as money trees. Are you sure you didn't leave any evidence? Old Feline asked Dudian. There was a smile on Dean's face. At least I don't think so. But now I should consider sending some evidence to the magistrate. Give them evidence? Old Feline was startled. The next day, Old Feline found Dudian and brought him a piece of good news. The Scott Consortium had reached an agreement on the cooperation of the matches. They would get 5% of the profits, and the rest would belong to the Scott Consortium. Dean couldn't help but look at Old Feline. Old Feline was able to talk about 5% of the profits. After all, the Scott Consortium could spend some time to analyze the match and make it themselves. Old Feline's only bargaining chip was the issue of time. If they were the first to produce it, they would naturally earn more and occupy a larger market share. This was an important key point that made it difficult for latecomers to catch up, unless there was a price war. The contract has been signed. Give me the structure of the match, and I'll give it to the Scott Consortium. They will pay us 1,000 gold coins. Old Feline excitedly said, the scale of our textile factory will be able to expand again with 1,000 gold coins. The rolling income will be more. Dudian nodded. The next step was to see if the Scott Consortium could make full use of the match to create benefits. The more the Scott Consortium earned, the more they would get. Mellon Consortium should be aware of it. Now we have to concentrate on protecting the textile factory. We have to get all the orders as soon as possible. Don't be afraid that we won't be able to eat. Dudian said to Old Feline. Yes. Old Feline smiled. He saw a glimmer of hope for survival in the crevice. Time passed day by day. Old Feline's 3rd son, Sandro, was in charge of the new textile factory. Old Feline's 2nd son, Jake, was in charge of the sales and promotion of the match shop in Yardtown. As for Old Feline himself, he would go to old acquaintances or wealthy businessmen to purchase textile orders. Although the Ryan family had declined, but Old Feline still had some contacts. Old Feline personally visited them to get orders. Moreover, the price was cheap. It was difficult for people to refuse. He received a lot of orders for textiles. Some of them were worth thousands of gold coins. Dudian didn't continue to stay in the Rhine castle. A few days later, he called Barton and the other two. He said to them, "Do you remember the person I slapped at the aristocratic banquet?" "Yes." Barton and the other two nodded. The scene of Dudian slapping the nobleman's face had left a deep impression on the three of them. The nobleman was a noble, but he was slapped by Dudian. Every time they thought of that scene, their blood boiled. They realized that their companion, who was born in an orphanage, had now grown to the point where it was difficult for them to look up to him. This made them even more determined to follow Dean. They were also orphans. If Dudian could do it, then they were eager to do it too. "It's good that you remember." Dudian handed a piece of paper to the three. "This is his address. Help me track him. I want to know his whereabouts, hobbies, and places he likes to go. This is the funds for your operation. Each of you will get 10 gold coins. Tell me if it's not enough." Barton and the other two looked at each other. Crone asked, "Dean, are you going to assassinate him like how you assassinated Deacon Huey?" Dudian looked at him. "Don't mention Deacon Huey's matter in the future. There are many people in the world who have incredible power. They can hear sounds from thousands of meters away. They can see the hair on the head of people who are thousands of meters away. You have to be more cautious. Do you understand? See the hair on the head of people who are thousands of meters away?" Barton and the other two were shocked. However, they thought about the powerful strength of knights. They gradually woke up and realized their mistake. "Go," Dudian said. The three nodded and left the Rhine castle. Chapter 189. Mount Erdo's Bourong family. Rudolph was in the study room of the castle. He carefully read the letter in his hand. His eyebrows wrinkled. Old Foulin wants to rely on textiles to start his business? His appetite is very good. Isn't he afraid that he won't be able to digest so many orders? He looked at the butler next to him. "How is the investigation going? How many factories do they have?" The middle-aged butler respectfully replied, "Only one." Old Foulin transformed the old factory that used to package fruits into a medium-sized one. They won't be able to make waves with just one factory. There must be a secret factory somewhere else. Rudolph flatly said, "Immediately send someone to investigate. The last time this old man came here, he was very healthy. He won't fall into senile disease. He dares to take so many orders, so he must be sure that there is something fishy going on." The butler nodded. "I'll go back and check. I heard that the Scott Consortium has made a new move recently." Rudolph looked at him. The butler replied, "It is said that they want to develop a new industry. Recently, they have been renting shops all over the commercial district, but they are renting small shops. The rent isn't high, so it should be a small industry. Small industry must be strangled." Rudolph said in a cold voice, "Tell the Mel family that we are pressuring the Scott Consortium's mining industry. They want to use other industries to alleviate the financial crisis. We must try our best to stop them." "Yes," the butler replied. "Yes." Rudolph suddenly said, "Did Saya come several times recently?" The butler replied, "Yes. She came to play with the Mississippi." Rudolph's eyes were slightly cold. "Play? Don't think that the little guy is too simple. Recently, she has been very close to the Milan family." The butler was startled. He hesitated. "Master, does the Mel Consortium want a humph? They won't do it openly. The consortium has to maintain the balance of power. Bourong family's industry is much stronger than that of Milan family. They're just playing around. That kid of Milan family is a knight, but his brain is very simple. He is doomed to be eliminated." Rudolph snorted. "Send someone to keep an eye on Saya. Don't let her talk nonsense to Mississippi. That little girl doesn't have good intentions." "I understand." The butler understood. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. In the training ground behind the Rhine castle, the 4 targets were fixed 200 meters away, and the arrows flew past them one by one, piercing through the targets. The arrow whistled through the air and hit the bullseye. Dean put away the bow and took the towel from the attendant next to him. He wiped the sweat off his face and moved his arms. He had been running around since he was released from the prison. The nail wound under his shoulder blade hadn't healed. Now, after a period of recuperation, the wound had completely healed. However, he would occasionally feel a dull pain when he pulled the bow. The bone inside the wound was still cracked. With my arm strength, I can shoot a target that is 300 meters away. But if I want to shoot a target that far, then the requirements for the bowstring is too high. General bows are made from rope. Beginner hunter's bow is made from beast tendons. Advanced bows are made from the tendons of some special monsters. The tendons are very strong. Unfortunately, such advanced bows are very expensive. At least thousands of gold coins. Dean put away the bow. He couldn't help but feel regret in his heart. The bow he was using was left behind by an intermediate knight during the glory days of the Ryan family. For him, it was barely suitable. I haven't used the bow for 3 years. Fortunately, I had a good foundation. Dean glanced at the targets 200 meters away. He turned and left the training ground. His identity was now that he was a hunter of the Ryan family. Naturally, he had to practice his hunting skills. Back to the castle, the servant brought him tea. Dean drank a few mouthfuls and went to the second floor to find old Feline. He closed the door and asked, "How is the progress of the factory?" Old Feline was reading a report on the table with a magnifying glass. His face showed a bit of sadness as he heard Dean's words. "The progress is a bit slow. Although the efficiency of the improved new textile machine is high, but the quantity is too small. I have received 43 orders, but I have completed 16 of them. I have earned about 8,000 gold coins. Of the remaining 27 orders, I estimate that more than a dozen won't be completed within the specified time." Dean smiled. "It's not urgent. Go and rent a factory in a few days. Send a few servants and guards to keep your whereabouts secret." "Rent a factory?" Old Feline was surprised. "I'm afraid that it will be difficult to manage 2 factories with a number of guards in my hands. Moreover, the movement of 2 factories will be too big. It will be easy for the secret to be leaked." Dean smiled. "Even if we maintain the current situation, the secret will be leaked sooner or later. Mellon Consortium will know that we have completed 16 orders in just half a month. They won't be laughing at us like before. If they send hunters to spy on us or bribe our guards, then it will be easy for them to know that there is something strange going on." Old Feline thought for a moment and sighed. "Indeed, in the next few days, continue to take orders. The more the better." Dean said, "Do I have to take orders?" Old Feline was stunned. Dean smiled. "It's money. Don't you want to earn it?" Old Feline was startled for a moment. He suddenly thought of something and couldn't help but laugh. Meanwhile, the next morning, Barton and others who had been sent by Dean returned the letters. Since the 3 of them had left the castle, they had written back almost every 3 days to report the situation they had tracked. Dean put the breakfast aside, opened the letter, and quickly read it. His eyes lit up as he put away the letter. He took out a match from his body and ignited it to burn the letter. Dean quickly ate his breakfast and called the servants to help him prepare the carriage. Dudian told the coachman an address, and the carriage slowly moved away. Commercial District, Lido Avenue. This was a very prosperous area. People who lived in the commercial district basically knew about this place. The reason why this avenue was famous was because of the Top Moulin Rouge here. The scale was huge. From morning to night, there was endless singing and dancing. Music came from the Moulin Rouge. When passing through the gate, one could feel the warm atmosphere inside. It was a paradise for male aristocrats. A carriage came and stopped in front of the gate. Dean jumped out of the carriage and looked around. He saw a brightly dressed teenager standing on the street. It was Barton. Barton saw Dean and quickly ran over. "You are here. Today is a holiday. He is here again." Dean nodded slightly and looked at Barton's dress. "Very good." Barton's face turned red. "I had bought it in order to get inside. Learning to use money is a skill." Dean patted him on the shoulder to express his gratification and then walked along the steps. Chapter 190. "Sir, please." At the entrance of the Moulin Rouge, there were several women dressed in sexy clothes. There was a trace of seductive charm in their eyes. It was obvious that they were specially trained. Dean looked calm as he passed through several women. He came to the ticket office in the hall and glanced at the prices. He looked back at Barton, who was following him. Barton understood Dudien's meaning and whispered, The ballroom on the second floor. Dudyan nodded and looked at the young girl behind the counter. Give me 2 tickets to the second floor. He took out 4 silver coins. The price of each ticket was equivalent to a month's salary of an ordinary resident. The young girl quickly collected the money and handed over the tickets. Sir, this way, please. The maid who was waiting to lead the way respectfully said. Dudyan was quite satisfied with the thoughtful service. He followed the maid and asked Barton, What about the 2 of them? They're inside. Barton's face was red. Dudyan smiled. You are the most honest. Barton scratched his head in embarrassment. At this time, both of them went up the wooden steps to the second floor. The Moulin Rouge was dim and the lights were bright. From time to time, they met young nobles who were walking out of the room. They were chatting and laughing as they left. It's here. Young masters, please. The maid came to a door and took the initiative to stretch out her slender arm to push open the heavy door. She respectfully said to Dudyan and Barton. The moment the door was pushed open, melodious music came out from inside. Dudyan and Barton went inside together. They saw that there was a counter at the entrance of the room. There were many masks behind the counter. It was a masked ball. Welcome, young masters. 2 sweet-looking girls behind the counter giggled and said, Would the 2 young masters please choose a mask that you like? Dudyan glanced at the counter and chose a green monster mask. Barton chose a falcon mask. Then they entered the ballroom. The area of the room was extremely large. At the moment, there was melodious music. Some young men wearing masks and dressed like gentlemen were gently dancing in the ballroom. Barton raised his hand and pointed vaguely. That's him. Dean was able to find Vic by smell. He saw Vic wearing a white gentleman's suit. He was holding a tall and graceful figure in the corner, gently swaying. His palms were touching and kneading the other's back and buttocks. There was a trace of smile on Dudyan's face. Tell both of them to wait in the bathroom. Barton was surprised but nodded. He turned and disappeared into the crowd. Dudyan waved to a waiter who was not far from him. The waiter came over with a fruit plate and wine. Dudyan held a glass of wine and walked through the crowd towards the dimly lit corner. Dudyan saw the 2 leaning against each other and whispering. The smile on his face became thicker. He poured the wine from Vic's armpit. Vic was infatuated with the fragrance of the beauty in his arms. Suddenly, he felt something cold under his armpits. He looked back and found that his clothes were wet. A figure wearing a green monster's head was standing next to him. The figure was holding a glass of wine. He looked flustered. Sorry. Dudyan quickly said in a low voice. Vic was furious. What's wrong with your eyes? Sorry. I accidentally slipped. Damn. Vic was so angry that he wanted to teach a lesson to the rash person. The enchanting woman in his arms was wearing a white cat mask. She looked at Dudyan and saw him repeatedly apologizing. Although she was unhappy in her heart, she still held Vic's cheek. Dear, forget it. Don't affect our mood. Vic suppressed his anger as he saw her persuasion. He fiercely stared at Dudyan. He looked back at the woman. I'm going to clean up. Wait for me. Well, go. The woman tiptoed and kissed him on the cheek. The anger on Vic's face disappeared. He shook his wet clothes. I'll be back soon. Wait for me. Then he turned away and pushed the crowd away. Dudyan mixed into the crowd and quietly followed him. The washroom was also connected to the toilet. There were a few wooden basins, and wooden spoons were used to scoop up the water. The toilet was also separated. It wasn't a squatting toilet, but a toilet that was similar to a toilet. A huge wooden board was laid flat at the height of the seat. The middle of the wooden board was hollowed out and connected to the sewage pipe. Dudyan saw Barton waiting for him. Crone and Joseph were next to him. Although they were wearing masks, Dudyan recognized them at first glance. Vic was taking off his coat in front of the wooden basin. He was ready to wring out the wine. There was no one here at the moment. Dudyan winked at the 3 of them and went behind Vic. He saw that Vic was wringing out his clothes and didn't notice Dudyan. It seemed that he was just another person who came to the washroom. Dudyan decisively chopped at the back of Vic's neck. Bang! Vic was caught off guard. His head tilted back and his body softened. Dudyan quickly held him and carried him to the washroom. He closed the door and said to Barton and the other 3, Stand guard outside. Dudyan took off Vic's coat and mask and replaced them with his own coat and mask. He helped Vic put on his own coat and mask and pushed open the door of the washroom. Barton and the other two were scared when they saw Duddian come out. Duddian immediately said, "It's me." He threw Vic to the other three. "Pretend that he is drunk and help him to leave. One of you go and stand guard in front. Bring the carriage." It was the first time for Barton and the other two to do this. They were frightened. They saw that Vic's body was warm and there was no wound. They were relieved and helped him to leave. Dean tidied up his clothes and returned to the ball. He soon found the woman wearing the white cat mask. "You are back." The woman wearing the white cat mask smiled. "Where are we going to play?" Duddian pointed to the sky. The woman wearing the white cat mask looked up. Dean's other hand quickly removed the string of golden necklace from her neck and quietly put it in his palm. He retracted it and threw it into the pocket of his pants. He learned this stealing technique from a burglar in prison. Chapter 191. Dean didn't speak. He silently followed the smell of Barton and the other two. After they walked out of the Moulin Rouge, he immediately pointed to his wet coat to the girl. Then he turned around and left. The girl was stunned for a moment. She stamped her feet, but continued to wait in the same place. Dean squeezed into the crowd and bypassed the girl's line of sight. He left the ballroom and went outside the Moulin Rouge. He saw a carriage with the Milan family's flag parked on the side of the road. A coachman and two knights were sitting in front of the carriage. They were waiting for the young master. The light in the ballroom was dim, so the girl didn't notice the difference. But the light outside was bright. Dean knew that it was difficult to hide from the eyes of the two knights. He took off his mask and coat. He took advantage of the fact that they were distracted looking at the street and quickly went down the stairs. He came to the carriage on the other side of the street. He opened the door and got on the carriage. "Come," Barton asked as he saw Dean get on the carriage. He looked nervous. "What should we do next?" Dean didn't speak. He looked at Vic, who had fainted next to him. He looked at Crone, who was sitting in the coachman's seat. "Let's leave here and go to Arthel Street." "Arthel Street?" Crone was shocked. That was the territory of magistrate. He didn't ask any more questions as he saw Dean didn't explain. He raised his whip and drove away. Arthel Street was far from Lido Street. It took them 2 hours to arrive. Vic woke up on the way, but he was knocked out again by Dean. Dean found a remote alley. He helped Vic get off the carriage and patted his back. Even if someone noticed, they would think that it was a few drunk nobles who wanted to vomit on the side of the road. Dean helped Vic to the deepest part of the alley. It was far away from the road, so the chances of being discovered by passers-by were low. Moreover, the sound of pedestrians on the side of the road wouldn't be too harsh. Dean helped Vic to lie down in a comfortable lying position. He covered Vic's body with garbage. The first reason was to avoid being seen by people. The second reason was to keep Vic's body temperature so that he wouldn't wake up too early. After doing this, Dean turned and left the alley. The passers-by had already gone far away. No one would stop to watch others vomit, so no one noticed that 2 people went in, but only 1 person came out. Duddian put on Vic's coat and looked at Barton and Joseph. "You guys wait here. If he wakes up, pretend to make a fuss to attract the attention of passers-by." "What's that?" Barton asked curiously. Duddian explained and taught her a few methods. Barton and Joseph came to a realization and memorized it. "What about attracting attention?" Joseph asked. Dean said, "He will feel ashamed and leave. Don't pester him too much. If he wants to leave, then leave. The purpose is to let others notice that he is here." Barton and Joseph looked at each other and nodded. "Got it." Dean looked at Crone. "Let's go to the 6th Street." Crone didn't ask any more questions. He fully played the role of the coachman and drove the carriage away. "Number 12 is in front." Duddian pointed to the direction. The carriage stopped in front of the 12th house on the 6th Street. It was a small manor. There was a lawn behind the fence. There was a chic and elegant house in the middle of the lawn. There was a huge fruit tree with red fruits hanging on the side of the house. Duddian smelled 2 smells in the house. There was another familiar smell. It was the smell of Huey. This house was the home of Huey. Duddian put on the mask and knocked on the door. After a moment, the door was pushed open. A beautiful woman in her 30s opened the door. She was shocked when she saw Duddian wearing a mask. Who are you? The magistrate has come to investigate. Dudeen lowered his voice. I need to borrow your husband's relics. The beautiful woman gave him a puzzled look, but still said, Please come in. Dudeen nodded. He put on the slippers and entered the house. He looked around to figure out the structure of the house. Another smell came from the room upstairs. It was the smell of Huey's youngest son. What relics do you want? The beautiful woman closed the door and looked at Dudeen suspiciously. She felt a bit strange and asked Dudeen suspiciously. Dean looked back at her and whispered, Is the wife your husband's most precious relic? The beautiful woman was startled as she looked at Dudeen. Aren't you from the magistrate? Dudeen said, Your husband used his life to make up for the crimes he committed, but at the same time his death brought me a little trouble. So I have to trouble you to help him fill the hole. Hearing this, the beautiful woman stepped back. Her eyes widened as she looked at the masked figure in horror. She didn't expect that the murderer who killed her husband would be standing in front of her. Her body trembled slightly. She was scared and angry. What hatred do you have with my husband? Why did you kill him? You are a devil. Are you not afraid of the magistrate's punishment? Dudeen didn't wait for her to continue. He quickly covered her mouth and whispered, I will give you a quick death. I won't be like your husband. He died in pain and begged me to kill him. Then he twisted his arm, and the beautiful woman's neck was broken. Dudien's face was gloomy as he slowly put her body on the ground. He was ready to quietly go upstairs. Suddenly, he heard a very light humming sound coming from upstairs. His footsteps slightly paused. His face was a bit ugly. He stopped, turned around, and grabbed the rag on the table. He wiped his fingers that had touched the beautiful woman's chin and lips. Then he took out the necklace from his pocket and threw it to an inconspicuous place on the ground. Just as he was about to leave, the humming sound suddenly drifted to the staircase. A head popped out from there and shouted, Hey! It was as if someone was playing a prank, jumping out to scare people. Dudien's body stiffened as they looked at each other. It was a child around 8 or 9 years old with short flaxen hair. His face was filled with a mischievous smile, but it suddenly froze. He saw his mother lying on the floor of the living room, as well as an unfamiliar figure wearing a mask. His mind went blank, and he froze on the spot. Chapter 192. After seeing the stranger leave in a hurry, the boy came back to his senses. He looked at his mother, who was lying on the ground, and hurriedly ran down the stairs. He couldn't stop the tears from welling up in his eyes. He went forward to help his mother up and shouted nervously and fearfully, Mom, wake up! Wake up! As he shook her, the beautiful woman's head swayed softly. The boy only felt the darkness in front of him. A strong fear gripped his heart. He raised his hand and touched his mother's artery. He did not inherit his father Huey's profession and became a priest. Instead, he loved to be a doctor since he was a child. In class, his teacher taught him a simple way to distinguish between life and death. Instead of talking about the breath, he touched the artery. When a person is seriously injured, the breath is extremely weak and difficult to detect, but touching the artery can be very accurate. When he touched it, the boy immediately felt that his neck was not beating. His brain was buzzing, and he trembled as he tried to breathe, but he also lost his vital signs. Tears flowed from his eyes, and he threw himself on the beautiful woman, crying loudly. After crying for a while, he suddenly thought of the murderer. His heart was filled with strong hatred and killing intent. He quickly got up and trotted out. He opened the door, but the murderer had already gone far. He clenched his fists as he turned around and closed the door. He went back to the room. He caught a glimpse of the golden necklace on the ground as he staggered back. He knew that there was no such necklace in his mother's jewelry box. He was about to pick it up when he remembered that his father often talked about destroying evidence, fingerprints, and so on. He stopped and turned to look at his mother, who was lying on the ground. He gritted his teeth and pushed the door. Dean took off his coat and trousers and put on his own clothes. He let Crone drive directly to the suburbs. Soon, the carriage reached the wilderness. There was a small depression that was filled with rain. It looked like a small pond. Dean asked Crone to stop the carriage. He threw Vic's coat and trousers into the carriage and put on his own clothes. He searched the carriage to confirm that nothing was left behind. He let Crone get off the carriage. He took the carriage to the edge of the pond and punched the horse's head. Bang! The horse's brain burst out. Its body shook as it staggered a few steps and fell down. Dean went to the back of the carriage and pushed the horse's body into the pond. "Let's go." Dean glanced around to confirm that no one was paying attention to them. He asked Crone to carry him away. Crone was surprised when he heard the word footprint. He squatted down and carried Dean away from the place. They came to a small stone road in the wilderness. He put down Dean and went back together. He saw Barton waiting for him as he rushed to the alley. Vic's scent had long faded in the alley. Most likely, he had left. Barton and Crone trotted over as they saw Dean and Crone. Dean looked at them and said, "It's getting late. Let's talk about it later." He hired a carriage from the roadside. "What did he leave?" Dean asked Barton. Barton hurriedly said, "About an hour before you guys came back." Dean calculated in his heart. It was a little earlier than when he killed Huey's wife. It was a small flaw. He slightly frowned. He hoped that the magistrate wouldn't trace it so carefully. After all, there were variables in any plan. He was lucky to be able to do this. After returning to the castle, Dean asked all of them to wash and change their clothes. The next day, Dean and Old Feline were having breakfast together. The maid of the castle handed over a few pieces of the morning newspaper. Dean took it and glanced at the morning newspaper of the Mellon Consortium. Today's headline was still attacking the Scott Consortium. However, the real target of the attack was questioning whether the Scott Consortium's product could replace the position of the fire scythe. Dean glanced at the other newspapers. There were also reports about the match, but the evaluation was more pertinent. In addition, two of the newspapers pointed out that he was the inventor of the match. The title on it wasn't hunter, but trainee priest. After all, hunters were a profession that needed to be concealed from the civilians. "Now, you become famous." Old Feline also saw the newspaper. He smiled at Dean. "I will give you another title in the future. Mr. Dean, the great inventor." Dean faintly smiled. It's strange that the Holy Church is obviously pursuing the alchemists, but the match and some other consortium's alchemy products can be sold in formal channels. Moreover, they are labeled as brand new products. Even the makers are called inventors. Isn't the packaging of alchemy not alchemy? Isn't it normal? Old Feline smiled. "Look at the wildflowers outside. They grow freely in the wilderness, but are worthless. If you move them to the flower shop, then you can sell them for a good price. Look at our clothes. If we take off our clothes, then we are naked. But if we wear these clothes, then I am a noble and you are a civilian." Dean asked, "Since the Holy Church knows that these inventors are alchemists, why do they allow them to exist in the open?" "Because the Scott Consortium has represented you to the Holy Church. The match you invented is created in accordance with the will of the God of Light." Old Feline smiled. "You also know that the Holy Church believes in the God of Light. The core doctrine of the Holy Church is that God created all things. The inventors of other consortiums need to indicate that the product was created under the instructions of God." Dean suddenly understood. So the inventors are equivalent to the alchemists who have surrendered to the Holy Church. Almost. Old Feline laughed. "There are many alchemists who can't mix with the Holy Church. You should know about the Temple of Elements. All the great inventors are gathered there." Dean had naturally heard that all the resources outside the giant wall would flow into the Temple of Elements. They would be evaluated by the Temple of Elements. So, the Holy Church has too many channels. Dean said. Old Feline shook his head. "Don't underestimate the Dark Church. They have an advantage in the dark." Dean nodded slightly. He knew that the Dark Church wouldn't be inferior to the Holy Church. "It seems that you're not a good believer." Dean laughed. Old Feline laughed. "You are wrong. My faith has always been very firm." "Do you still have faith? Isn't gold a kind of faith?" Chapter 193. Dean smiled as he switched to the military newspaper and started to read. Arrogant. Deacon Huey assassinated. The real culprit has taken the life of Deacon Huey's wife, Mary. The disciplinary team has been searching overnight. At present, they have grasped some evidence. Dean carefully read. Yesterday afternoon, Deacon Huey's wife, Mary, was killed at home. According to the investigation, the neighbors saw a suspicious person wearing a mask enter Deacon Huey's house. The magistrate has grasped the evidence and is currently making a secret arrest. There was a slight smile on Dean's face as he read the final summary. Why are you so happy? Old Feline noticed Dean's expression. He looked at the military newspaper in Dean's hand. He didn't wear reading glasses, so he couldn't see the handwriting. Dean handed over the newspaper. Old Feline looked at it for a moment. He looked at Dean in astonishment. Did you do this? Dean looked at his eyes. It's a Milan family. Old Feline was stunned. The castle of the Milan family. Chapter 194. Vic looked at him in astonishment. What are you talking about? What did you see? Where did you come from? You little devil. In the end, Vic's tone couldn't help but contain a bit of anger. Two disciplinary youths pulled the little boy's arm to prevent him from rushing towards Vic. You are a murderer. I want to kill you. I want revenge. The little boy struggled. His eyes were red as he looked at Vic. Vic's face was ugly as he looked at the two disciplinary youths. What did you find this, kid? This is slander. Nonsense. Slander nobles. Do you not care? The scar-faced youth sneered. What do you think the magistrate is? He is the son of Deacon Huey and the witness who witnessed you killing Deacon Huey's wife last night. Now, please come back with us for investigation. Vic and Abel were startled. They didn't think that the little boy was Deacon Huey's son. Abel's face was gloomy as he stared at the little boy. You said that you saw him kill your mother? If that's the case, why didn't you get killed? Are you sure it was his face? When the little boy heard his majestic voice, he raised his head and looked at him. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he raised his hand to wipe them away. He gritted his teeth and said, although I didn't see his face, I would never mistake his clothes. He was wearing a mask yesterday. Clothes? Vic was startled. He looked down at his clothes. A light flashed in his heart. His pupils couldn't help but shrink. When he woke up yesterday, he found that his coat was missing. He thought that he was robbed. Today's coat was the same as yesterday's. There were 2 or 3 spare coats in his wardrobe. Abel was relieved when he heard the little boy's words. He looked at the 2 disciplinary youths. It seems that it is just a small misunderstanding. There are many people who wear the same clothes. My son's taste is similar to others. It should be a mistake. The sword scar youth's face sank. Do you think that we are just relying on a child's words to arrest him? Don't talk nonsense with me. Are you going to hand over the person or not? Abel's face slightly changed. Abel's face slightly changed. He didn't think that the attitude of the disciplinary officer would be so tough. His heart was sullen, but he tried to restrain himself. He knew that it would be difficult for the Milan family to resist the wrath of the magistrate. Even the entire Melon consortium wouldn't be able to settle this easily. They could only bribe some of the lower-level nobles or spend money to invite deacon-level people. If they really offended the magistrate, then even the nobles would be destroyed. Moreover, the Melon consortium would only help them. It was impossible for them to use the strength of the entire consortium to help them. Humph, Alex said. The magistrate is getting more and more arrogant. I will go and see for myself. Then he looked at the butler. Prepare the carriage. The butler agreed with a trembling voice and turned around to give the order. Vic and Abel's face changed. They knew that the matter was irreversible. They also knew that no matter what the final outcome would be, it would be extremely detrimental to the reputation of the family. The magistrate wouldn't be unaware of this point. Since they had come to arrest the person, they must have a firm grasp of the situation. This was the point that they were most worried about. I will find a way. You go first. Abel sighed as he looked at Vic's pleading eyes. Vic clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. His heart was sullen, but he was powerless to resist. The sword-scar youth waved his hand. A knight from the magistrate handed over a pair of handcuffs. Vic's face was ugly, but he still handed over the handcuffs. Abel's face was gloomy as he watched Vic being led away by a knight. After a moment, he turned around and entered the hall. Today's breakfast is really good. Dudian finished his breakfast in the Rhine castle. He drank tea and looked at old Feline. I have to go out to do something. Old Feline was interested. What's the matter? It's time to appeal my case. Dean smiled. It's time to completely restore my freedom. At present, he was out on bail, although he could leave the prison and move freely. But after all, he was a criminal. Every once in a while, he had to go to the magistrate to report. If there was a new development in his case, then he had to be on call. If he couldn't arrive, then he would be regarded as a fugitive and would be wanted. Old Feline was startled. Do you want to deal with the Melon Consortium? No. Dean got up and put on his coat. You have to eat slowly. You can't eat all at once. He turned and left the restaurant. He went to the door and called the butler to prepare the carriage. Arthur Street, the magistrate. Alex got out of the carriage and followed his grandson, Vic, to the magistrate's hall. The prisoner is being interrogated. Outsiders are not allowed to enter. You should wait in the hall. The youth on the left side said to Alex. Alex coldly snorted. You don't have to worry about me. He looked at Vic. Child, don't worry. Everything will be fine since it's a misunderstanding. Vic's nervous heart calmed down as he heard Alex's words. He nodded and left with the two disciplinary officers. In a dark interrogation room, a slender young woman, wearing the same silver armor, said to Vic, Please cooperate with the next investigation. Vic was sitting opposite to her. She looked at Vic and said, Please cooperate with the next investigation. The tension in Vic's heart relaxed a lot when he saw her beautiful face. He revealed a confident smile. I am innocent. I will certainly cooperate with you. That's good. The young woman nodded and said, Last night, Huey's wife was killed at home. At that time, Huey's son, Kino, saw you with his own eyes. Although you were wearing a mask, but your clothes exposed you. Moreover, when you left in a hurry, the neighbors and passers-by saw your figure coming out Huey's house and hurriedly got on a carriage and left. We have found these witnesses, and we can provide testimony at any time. Vic was startled. His face turned ugly. Don't talk about you. It's really a misunderstanding. How could I kill Deacon Huey? Am I crazy? How could I do such a stupid thing? Someone must have worn the same clothes to frame me. Oh, right. Something happened to me yesterday. I was knocked unconscious by someone. When I woke up, my coat was gone. It must have been done by the person who attacked me. He must have deliberately framed me. The young woman looked at him and nodded. Then let me ask you, did you go to the Moulin Rouge on Lido Street yesterday? Vic was startled. Yes, I was in the Moulin Rouge yesterday afternoon. How could I kill Deacon Huey's wife from so far away? Chapter 195. Nothing is impossible. The distance from the Moulin Rouge to Huey's house is at most 2 hours. The young woman coldly said, According to our investigation, you didn't go back in your own carriage yesterday. The servant who was going to send you home didn't find you in the Moulin Rouge. Moreover, many people saw you on the streets of Terra Street yesterday. These are all witnesses. Do you still want to quibble? Vic's face was ugly. He was covered with cold sweat. I was framed. In fact, I wasn't in the Moulin Rouge yesterday afternoon. I said that I was attacked and fainted. When I woke up, I was in the alley of the street. I don't know what happened. As a knight, you try to cover up your crimes with hypocritical lies. Shameful. The young woman didn't give him any face and said coldly, We have already followed your scent and found the carriage you used in a pool in the suburbs. The horse's head was killed with one punch. With your strength, you should be able to do this. We also fished out your coat and pants from the carriage. They are exactly the same as the one you are wearing. According to our secret investigation, the same coat in your wardrobe is indeed missing, right? Moreover, many servants saw you wearing another coat last night. Vic opened his mouth, but found himself unable to refute. He was shocked and angry. After listening to the young woman's words, he gradually understood what kind of situation he had fallen into. He also understood that the person who attacked him yesterday had put him in a dead end. All the forged evidence made him unable to defend himself. I bought my coat yesterday. I said that my coat was taken away and I was knocked out. Vic clenched his teeth and insisted on telling the truth. Still not pleading guilty? The young woman indifferently said, If there is no conclusive evidence, why would we go to your family to arrest you? We don't want to apologize to you filthy aristocrats afterwards. Vic's face changed as he heard her words. He completely ignored her beautiful face and angrily said, "You dare to insult aristocrats?" The scar-faced youth who was standing behind the door immediately stepped forward and shouted at Vic, "Presumptuous! Where do you think you are?" Vic looked at him with an angry face. The scar-faced youth's eyes were like a sharp sword. Vic's heart tightened. He gradually restrained his anger and sat down again. The scar-faced youth looked at the young woman. "Timothy, pay attention to your words. Although the aristocrats of the outer wall are abandoned, but they still have their titles. Don't let these words reach the ears of the people of the inner wall." The young woman Timothy snorted and looked at Vic. "It's best to be honest." Vic was secretly surprised as he heard the words of the sword-scarred youth. He had heard of the magistrate's name for a long time, but he rarely saw them. He didn't expect that these people would come from the inner wall. His heart couldn't help but shrink as he thought about the towering inner wall. He had heard his grandfather and father say that it was their lifelong goal to enter the inner wall. "I'm not lying." Vic looked at Timothy's threatening eyes. For the first time, he felt that beautiful things could be so dangerous. He didn't flinch as he tried to pass his inner sincerity through his eyes. He stared at Timothy's eyes. "I swear by my knight's medal that if I lie, I will suffer the most brutal Azura torture." Azura torture was a brutal punishment used by the Holy Church to deal with evil people. The body would be stripped of flesh and blood and fed to the dogs. It was extremely bloody. "Knight," Timothy sneered, "I have seen many people like you. I have executed many people like you. There were beginner knights, intermediate knights, and even senior knights. As for aristocrats, I have annihilated at least 3 aristocrats. One of them was colluding with an alchemist and was killed by me. Your fake identity can only deceive the civilians. We only talk about evidence in a magistrate. I don't care if you are a knight or an aristocrat. Even if you are the Pope, if I find evidence, then I will sentence you to death." Vic's face turned ugly as he heard her words. He didn't think that he would meet a punisher who hated evil. Moreover, her tone was so arrogant. Vic's heart was filled with indignation. He thought that if he knew the magistrate, would he dare to lay a finger on him? Although he thought this way, he also knew that it was not an existence that he could come into contact with. He felt bitterness in his mouth and said, "I was really wronged. Although I lied to you earlier, I really didn't kill anyone. I really didn't lie about that. You still don't admit it?" Timothy sneered and looked at the scar-faced youth. "Bring in the witness and the evidence." The scar-faced youth nodded and gave an order to the knight next to him. Vic's heart turned cold when he heard their words. Although he had the temperament of a noble young master, but he knew that he was framed. The evidence in the magistrate's hands was likely to be planted on him. If the evidence was conclusive, then he wouldn't be able to defend himself. Soon, the scar-faced youth brought in a beautiful woman with an oval face and pointed chin. "Is it him?" The beautiful woman's face was filled with anger when she saw Vic. "Yes, it's him." Vic was stunned when he saw the woman, but after hearing her words, he became angry and roared, "You slut! Who bought you to frame me? Who?" "Silence!" Timothy shouted. Vic gritted his teeth as he stared at the beautiful woman. The scar-faced youth frowned. He blocked the woman with his body and looked at Vic. "Yesterday at the Moulin Rouge, was she your dance partner?" Vic was stunned when he heard this. He looked at the youth with astonishment. "What?" The scar-faced youth's face sank. He endured his anger and repeated the question again. Vic heard it clearly and was even more astonished. He thought that the woman was bribed to testify that he wasn't at the Moulin Rouge. He didn't think that it wasn't the case. His heart was filled with hope. "Yes, she was my dance partner yesterday afternoon. She can testify. She is my witness." Vic's heart was filled with hope as he hurriedly said. Timothy sneered and said, "Indeed, she is your dance partner. But do you still remember this thing?" Then he opened the paper in the scar-faced youth's hand and handed it to Vic. It was a necklace. Vic was surprised. This is the necklace I gave her." Chapter 196. When Vic heard Timothy's words, he was completely stunned. Confess. What crime do I confess? I didn't kill anyone. What did I confess? Well, you're still being stubborn, Timothy said impatiently. At the scene of Deacon Huey's wife's death, this bracelet was dropped. There was her smell on it. It is indeed her necklace. Vic's eyes widened. This necklace was at the scene of the murder? How is it possible? Besides, even if it is like this, you can't doubt me. If someone killed someone, it was her. What does it have to do with me? The woman was shocked when she heard his words. She was shocked and angry. What nonsense are you talking about? They have proved that the person who killed yesterday was a man. I have seen your discarded clothes. There are wine stains on it. It is definitely your clothes. Moreover, you stole this necklace from my neck yesterday. When I saw it was gone, I looked for you everywhere, but I couldn't find you. Vic's eyes widened. He felt a little dizzy. He suddenly realized how insidious this plan was. Before he fainted, it seemed that someone had passed by him. The murderer should be that person. I know. Vic's eyes suddenly opened as he excitedly said, the murderer is the person who spilled the wine on me yesterday. When I went to clean up my clothes, he knocked me out. Then he disguised himself as me and stole her necklace. Then he consigned me to Terrace Street. Then he wore my clothes and sneaked into Deacon Huey's house. He killed his wife and framed me. The corners of Timothy's mouth curled into a cold smile when he heard his words. He said, that's a good idea, but all the evidence points to you. Do you think I'll believe that you've been framed just because you made up a story? Vic clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. This is clearly a frame-up. Aren't you known to be fair and impartial? Why don't you thoroughly investigate this matter? You said that I killed Deacon Huey, but why would I kill him? I am not crazy. I have nothing to do with him. Why would I take such a big risk to kill someone I have no contact with? What am I after? Timothy frowned slightly. If there was anything suspicious about this investigation, it would undoubtedly be the motive. This was also something they could not figure out. According to their investigation, although this noble young master liked to hang out in places of singing and dancing, womanizing, and had some common bad habits common to nobles, he did not have any other characteristics, such as violent temper, sadism, and so on. Therefore, they couldn't figure out why Vic killed Deacon Huey. The scar-faced youth looked at Vic. He pondered a little and said to Timothy, this matter is a bit strange. We will re-examine it so that the Milan family won't gossip. Timothy frowned and looked at Vic. He thought for a moment and said, but during the investigation, you will be temporarily detained in the magistrate. You will be detained until the results come out. Vic's tightened heartstrings loosened. He felt cold sweat drenching his underwear. He sat on the chair wearily. For the first time, he felt that he was so close to destruction. He sat on the chair. Timothy and the knight with the sword scar left the interrogation room. They looked at each other as they watched Vic being escorted away by two knights. The knight with the sword scar pondered. The method he said before is indeed possible. Timothy furrowed his brows and said, although we haven't found his motive for killing for the time being, the evidence is conclusive, and he can tell many stories to exonerate himself. Every criminal can find perfect reasons and hypotheses for being framed, but hypotheses are ultimately just hypotheses. The scar-faced youth heard Timothy's words and nodded. This is also true, but we should try to find a motive as soon as possible. In this case, the Milan family will have nothing to say. Timothy slightly nodded and said in a low voice, Deacon Huey was assassinated. The impact of this matter is too bad. If we can't solve the case as soon as possible, the reputation of our magistrate will be greatly affected. So we must have an explanation within 3 days. This is the order from the top. In addition, this time when he was arrested, the Milan family will definitely find a way to find a scapegoat for him. I have seen the tricks of these aristocrats. They don't care whether he killed or not, as long as he comes out safely. The scar-faced youth sighed. I know. I will give you the result within 3 days. All right. Timothy nodded slightly. At this time, a middle-aged deacon came over. He was holding a stack of information in his hand. Timothy asked, what big case is this? Why are you so diligent? The middle-aged deacon saw the two of them and smiled. It's not a big case. It's an old case handled by Deacon Huey 3 years ago. Today, the main culprit of the case came to appeal. He wants to reopen the case. The case handled by Deacon Huey. Timothy and the scarred youth looked at each other. Timothy said, "What is the case? Is it convenient to tell us? Maybe it will help us solve the case of Deacon Huey's assassination." The middle-aged deacon didn't refuse. It's not a big case. It's a theft case. 3 years ago, there was a hunter from the Mellon Consortium. He stole the Longshan ruby from the Milan family. According to the price of the ruby, the hunter was sentenced to 230 years in prison. Now he's been bailed out by the aristocrats. Timothy and the scarred youth were startled for a moment. Some thoughts suddenly connected in their minds, and a glimmer of understanding flashed in their eyes. "I see. Thank you," Timothy said. She pulled the scar-faced youth away. "Immediately investigate this person and the aristocrats behind him. Also investigate the cases that Deacon Huey has handled for the Milan family in recent years." "Yes." The scar-faced youth didn't need her to say anything. His eyes were full of excitement as he finally found a clue to solve the case. The two of them immediately separated. The hall of the magistrate. Dean sat on the sofa and waited. An old man was sitting on the sofa opposite him. The old man was wearing a huge gemstone ring. Judging from his sitting posture and temperament, he should be a noble. The old man was Alex, who was waiting for Vic outside. Dean looked at him. There was a trace of a smile on his face. "Grandpa, you are so old. Do you want to handle a case?" Alex turned to look at Duddian. He saw that the teenager was dressed well. He nodded, but didn't say anything. At the moment, he was thinking about how to get Vic out of the magistrate. "It seems that you have encountered a lot of trouble." Dean smiled and continued. "Didn't your family accompany you?" Alex frowned. He didn't expect the boy to be so courageous. Couldn't he see that he wasn't an ordinary person? How dare he talk to him? His tone was indifferent. "Little guy, you have come to magistrate at such a young age. You have to learn something good." Duddian shrugged his shoulders. "I didn't commit a crime. Someone framed me, but I believe that you must have been framed as well. But you don't have to worry. The magistrate is fair and impartial. The people who framed you will get a fair verdict." Alex felt a little comfortable as he heard Dean's words. He indifferently said, "I wasn't framed. It's my grandson. I hope that the magistrate's eyesight can match up to you." Dean laughed. "I'm not small." Alex faintly smiled, but didn't say anything. At this time, an official judge came over and asked Dean and the old man, "Who is Mr. Dean?" "I am." Dean replied. "This is your notice." The official youth handed it to Duddian. Dean raised his hand and glanced at it. The appeal was passed. The court would be held in 2 days. He had to go back and prepare. There was a touch of smile on his face as he put away the notice. He got up and said to the old man, "You see, the magistrate is very fair. My matter has been settled. I believe that your matter will be solved soon." Chapter 197. The sun rose, and the dawn light shined on the Rhine Castle's steeple. The castle recovered from the silence. The servants got up one after another, fetching water, washing clothes, and cooking. Smoke curled up from the chimneys. Duddian got up on time and went upstairs to the small dining room to eat with old Feline. "You got up so early?" Duddian saw old Feline sitting in the dining room. Old Feline smiled. "I'm old, so I don't sleep much." Duddian pulled out a chair and sat down. "Where's the factory?" "Everything is in progress. The Mellon Consortium hasn't mentioned our consortium in the newspapers in the past 2 days. Most of them want us to relax our vigilance and then prepare for a surprise attack. Everything is expected." Old Feline smiled. "We can make a big consortium like Mellon suffer a loss. That's the reputation of our consortium. You have a lot of cards in your hand. Naturally, others can't calculate which card you're going to play." Duddian faintly smiled. "The reputation is established, but the suppression will follow. The more happy you are, the more you can't be careless." Old Feline looked at him. "Your case will be heard in 2 days. Are you ready?" At present, the magistrate's eyes are focused on tracking down the murderer of Huey's wife. At this time, your case is related to Huey's wife. Won't they shift their attention to you? Dudeen said. Their eyes have never left me from the beginning to the end. How can they shift their attention to me? From the first time I was called to the magistrate for questioning, I was always on their list of suspects. The reason why they didn't send someone to interrogate me again was because they didn't find any evidence. Moreover, the steel nails were reported in the newspapers. The blood on the nails wasn't human blood, but dog blood. It's impossible to catch a dog to confess, right? Old Foulene smiled. This is not your masterpiece. Dudeen shrugged. They don't have evidence. Even if they suspect, they can only stare. But this time it's different. The Milan family killed Huey's wife. There are witnesses and evidence. Although they will certainly find out that I went to the Moulin Rouge and left in the afternoon, but they still don't have conclusive evidence to prove that I killed her. The first rule of a heavenly magistrate is to be fair, just, and open, and to use evidence to convict. Suspicion is only an expression of personal feelings. It's a private nature, unless the Milan clan has completely bought over the magistrate, and they recklessly find a scapegoat. But this is tantamount to slapping the whole magistrate's face with money. They won't be so stupid. Old Foulene thought for a moment. You are right. No consortium can buy the magistrate, not even the Holy Church. But if your suspicion is too heavy, then it will inevitably lead to a serious investigation. Even if you're innocent, they can prove that you're guilty. No, this case will be over soon. Dean shook his head. Old Foulene was surprised. It will end soon. It has been almost a month since Huey Wright's assassination. This incident has been fermenting for too long. The faces of the magistrate are already very ugly. At this time, they just need someone to be immediately convicted. At least from the judicial process, it is enough to prove that the other party is the murderer. As for who killed Huey, in addition to his relatives and friends, no one cares about it. Dudeen said. Old Foulene was startled. He couldn't help but look at Dean. How can you be so sure? That's why the newspaper is a good thing. Dean smiled. Every time the Huey Wright incident is mentioned, it always focuses on describing how the magistrates solve the case, how cunning the murderer is, and so on. At first glance, it seems normal, but I know the process of this incident the best. Every day, they report about the tracking and the progress of the investigation. It seems that some of the tracking techniques are very powerful, but they're just trying to cover up the truth. They're trying to maintain the dignity of the magistrate. Old Foulene nodded. He could understand this point. If there was a problem with the property of his consortium, then he would report something else in the news to divert people's attention and cover up the core problem. At this time, the butler brought today's morning newspaper. Dean grabbed the newspaper and read it. There was a faint smile on his face. The Milan family's matter is basically a foregone conclusion. It will become the cornerstone of my appeal. This time it happens to involve Huey Wright's assassination. The disciplinary authorities will go into depth to investigate both Huey Wright and the Milan family. My case will also be closely investigated. The Boron Consortium and Milan Consortium have joined hands to frame me. The disciplinary authorities will intervene in the investigation to return my innocence. Old Foulene also grabbed the newspaper and read it. After a moment, he couldn't help but sigh. It is really over. The news agencies of the Scott Consortium and the Huashan Consortium are reporting that the Milan family is involved in the assassination of Deacon Huey Wright. The Scott Consortium and the Mellon Consortium are hostile on the surface. The Huashan Consortium and several other consortia are eager for the Mellon Consortium to have a problem. The Milan family is the cornerstone of the Mellon Consortium. Now the eldest son of the patriarch is involved in the famous murder case. It is a big blow to the Milan family. Dudeen smiled. When the prey is thrown up, there will be hunters who will shoot it. Old Foulene deeply looked at the teenager. The faint smile on the latter's face made him feel a bit palpitate and cold. If such a plan was made by a middle-aged man, then it would be reasonable. But a teenager who had such a big picture awareness and strategy. He was afraid that in the future he would stir up even more incredible things. Perhaps it was right to agree to your request, Old Foulene slowly said. Dudeen looked at him. The corner of his mouth curved into a subtle arc, Arter Street. Magistrate. Timothy and a knife-scarred youth searched through the archives. 3 or 4 official priests, under their command, flipped through the files and searched them one by one. After a few hours, 3 files were handed over to Timothy's hands. These are the cases related to the Milan family and Deacon Huey Wright. Timothy's eyes narrowed as he looked at them one by one. Sylvia's giant wall calendar 302, Black Snow Season. Longshan Ruby Theft Case. Giant wall calendar 303, Rainy Season. Milan Mine Case. Giant wall calendar 304, Black Snow Season. Milan Murder Case. Timothy slightly raised his eyebrows as he read from top to bottom. Chapter 198. The Longshan ruby was found in the residence of the primary hunter called Dean. Timothy slightly raised his eyebrows as he looked at the sword scar youth. If I remember correctly, we had investigated the suspect named Dean 3 years ago. He was a newcomer to the Melon Consortium. Moreover, he was a scavenger. He accidentally got magic marks from outside the giant wall and was promoted to a hunter. Yes, he was just a primary hunter at that time. Is there a way for a primary hunter to steal one of the 3 treasures of the Milan Consortium? The sword scar youth shrugged. Unless the knights recruited by the Milan Consortium are a pile of shit. Otherwise, I think it is impossible. Such an obvious framing could pass the verdict. Timothy's face was gloomy. If it wasn't for the death of Deacon Huey, I don't know how many dirty things he would have been involved in. The youth with the sword scar sighed. No one can resist the temptation of wealth. After all, the priest and deacon are also human beings. They have families, children, and wives. Moreover, he loves gambling. There are too many places where he needs money, but too few places where he can get it. In any case, a mistake is a mistake. Any reason is an excuse. Timothy said, such an obvious framing could be passed. Some of the systems of the magistrate are contradictory. There will always be problems if a case is handed over to one person. The sword scar youth looked at her and smiled. It is better not to talk about this outside. It is because of the infiltration of the aristocracy that we have to stay in the inner wall. The inner wall is more complicated than here. Timothy frowned, but didn't say anything. She continued to read the next 2 cases. Milan family. Hall. With a bang, Alex threw the teacup on the ground. The tea, which was worth tens of silver coins, spilled on the ground and soaked the red carpet. He looked at Abel angrily and said, "You have no choice? Are you telling me that there is no way? But this is your son." Abel's face was as gloomy as water. "I have contacted the Mel family and the Bourong family. They have used the resources of the consortium to contact the high level of the magistrate in Fell Street. However, there was no reply. This is a deacon-level assassination case. No one can intervene. Moreover, the public opinion of the other consortia is giving them too much pressure, especially the Scott Consortium." His fingers clenched into a fist. The other consortia are just putting pressure on Vic. They have directly determined that Vic is the murderer. They have published all the evidence collected by the magistrate. They won't release Vic unless there is sufficient evidence to prove his innocence. Alex slammed his walking stick on the ground and roared, "Don't talk to me about evidence. I want my grandson to come out without a single hair on his head." Abel's face twitched slightly and said, "I will contact the magistrate again." With that, he didn't even bow and turn around to leave. The other middle-aged men and women in the hall looked at each other. One of them stepped forward and said, "Father, don't worry too much. Don't worry yourself too much. Little Wei has been an honest boy since he was young, and he's a knight. I believe he won't do something so reckless." Alex stared at him. "Do you need to say that? Even if he did it, so what? A deacon is dead. The magistrate can just find someone to take the blame. Why do they have to be so serious?" The middle-aged man smiled in his heart, but didn't say anything. 2 days passed quickly. It was 7:35 in the morning. The weather was cloudy. A carriage slowly entered the city that was shrouded in gray radiation clouds. It stopped in front of the magistrate. 2 figures got off the carriage. They were Dean and Old Feline. Although Duddian refused, Old Foline insisted to come along as a bailer. Moreover, he was an old aristocrat. This would increase the success rate of Dudion's appeal. Dean could only appreciate Old Foline's kindness. He took the lead and jumped off the carriage. He helped Old Foline to get off the carriage and went up the steps to the magistrate. There are 2 cases in the court today. After the first one is finished, it will be your turn. An official came to greet Dean and Old Foline. He led them to the court. The court was extremely spacious. It was like an old church. There were many people here. Most of them were from various consortia's news agencies. They are from the Scott Consortium. They are from the Green Consortium. Old Foline and Dean chose to sit in the middle of the row. He introduced the origin of these people to Dean. Dean secretly admired Old Foline's eyesight. Old Foline had lived in the Rhine Castle for a long time, but he didn't expect that he would be so familiar with the people from the outside consortium's news agencies. After a moment, there was a commotion at the entrance. Dean and Old Foline turned to look. Their expressions slightly changed. They saw a group of 6 or 7 people. They were led by an old man. He was followed by a middle-aged man who was dressed like a gentleman. His face was hazy. The other people behind him were also silent. His name is Alex. He is the patriarch of the Milan family. Old Foline whispered. Dean smiled. I know. Old Foline said, behind him is his son, Abel. He is the current patriarch of the Milan family. He is a very shrewd little guy. Unfortunately, his son didn't inherit his shrewdness. It's not necessarily a good thing to have a smart father. Dean said, indeed, the little guy lacks tempering. He is deeply favored by the patriarch. It's inevitable that he will become arrogant. Old Foline nodded. At this time, Alex, Abel, and others found a place to sit. They were sitting in the front row of the court. Behind them are the senior stewards of the Mel and Bourong families. There are also several other families. Old Foline whispered. Duddy nodded. It was impossible for Mel and Bourong to get involved in this mess. As time passed, more and more people came to the court. After 9 o'clock in the morning, the court officially opened. 3 deacons wearing pure white silk robes with gold inlaid lace came to the court and sat down. All of them were older. Knight of the magistrate escorted a figure into the courtroom. It was Vic. Chapter 199. Vic dragged his body to the courtroom. The first thing he did was to look at the audience. He saw his father Abel and grandfather Alex in the first row. His eyes showed a pleading look. Alex looked at him and said loudly, Don't be afraid, child. Grandpa will get you back to your innocence. Vic's eyes were red. He deeply felt his grandfather's care. His heart was full of remorse and shame. But more than that, he hated the murderer who had framed him. After Vic took his seat, an old man on the judge's seat coughed and said indifferently, Silence. The other people who were pointing at Vic suddenly quieted down. There was a dead silence in the room. After the investigation of the magistrates, 4 disciplinary officers, and 2 deacons, it was decided that Mr. Vic Milan of the Milan family had sneaked into Deacon Huey's house on the afternoon of the 18th of this month and killed Deacon Huey's wife. Do you plead guilty? The thin old man in the middle looked down at Vic and coldly stared into his eyes. I don't plead guilty. Vic shouted. I am wronged. I'm a knight. I will never lie. The thin old man snorted coldly and said, Silence. Your knight status has been deprived by the Knight's Hall yesterday afternoon. Vic's face stiffened. He looked back at his father and grandfather in the stands. After all, he grew up in a noble family. He knew that the reason behind the deprivation of his knight status was because the Knight's Hall had given up on him. There was external pressure on the Knight's Hall. The Knight's Hall had to make a choice, and that choice was to draw a line. Deacon Huey's son, Keno, witnessed you killing his mother. At that time, you left in a panic. You were seen by the neighbors on the left side. The necklace you stole was left at the scene. There are witnesses and material evidence. Do you plead guilty? The thin old man shouted. Vic's face turned ugly. He clenched his fists. He suddenly felt the humility of a man who rebelled against the law and the world. But he still gritted his teeth and said, I was framed. There are many doubts. Why didn't you investigate it clearly? You said that Deacon Huey's son saw me. In that case, I killed his mother. Why didn't I kill him? Moreover, you said I stole the necklace? It's ridiculous. My Milan family started with gemstones. What kind of gemstones have I not seen? Why would I steal a necklace? The thin old man said coldly, You didn't kill Kino. Maybe you found your conscience at that time, or maybe you didn't notice Kino's existence. As for why you stole the necklace, the reason was very simple. Perhaps you felt that giving a valuable gold necklace to a dancer from the Moulin Rouge was not worth it, so you stole it back. Of course, it may also be your personal hobby. There are many reasons, but you stole the necklace, which can be proved by witnesses and material evidence. The necklace appeared in Deacon Huey's house and was found by Kino next to Deacon Huey's wife's body, which is also a fact. When Vic heard the old man's words, he felt that he had heard the biggest joke in the world. But he couldn't laugh. Instead, anger almost burned his whole chest. He suddenly understood that when the evidence appeared, all words will be overshadowed. When prejudice arises, but trust doesn't exist, all explanations are pale cover-up. He clenched his fists and tried to restrain the anger in his heart. He gritted his teeth and said, I want Deacon Huey's son to confront me. The thin old man looked at him and said to the knight next to him, Bring him here. The knight nodded. After a moment, a little boy of 8 or 9 years old came to the court. The little boy was led by the knight. As soon as he appeared, it attracted the attention of the people from the various news agencies. They recorded everything. Kino, please tell us what happened at that time. The thin old man looked at Kino and said in a calm tone. Kino nodded slightly. He looked at Vic with hatred. Vic saw his eyes and hurriedly said, Boy, think about it. Are you sure you saw me with your own eyes? I mean my face. Kino stared at him. You were wearing a mask, but I remember your clothes. You were the one who killed my mother. Vic gritted his teeth. Boy, if I killed your mother, then why didn't I kill you? He couldn't wait to strangle the little boy. Kino clenched his fists. You didn't find me. I was hiding in the stairs. Liar. Vic angrily said, I'm a knight. How could I not detect a child nearby? I said that I was hiding. Kino gritted his teeth. I was playing hide and seek with my mother. That's why you didn't notice. Vic choked and couldn't speak for a while. Dean, who was in the stands, looked at the little boy with a bit of surprise in his eyes. After thinking for a moment, he suddenly understood why the boy would lie. He secretly sighed in his heart. Hatred could really make a person crazy, even if he was a child. Now the evidence is conclusive. Do you plead guilty? Thin old man indifferently asked. Vic roared in anger. I didn't kill anyone. I don't plead guilty. I won't plead guilty even if I die. Alex, who was sitting in the front row, slowly stood up and said to the skinny old man, Sir, there are many suspicious points in this case. Please be sure to represent the justice of the magistrate and investigate this case seriously. Don't let others frame and use commercial means to maliciously retaliate against our family. After all, my grandson was once a knight. Although it has been taken away, he was once a dignified knight. He will never do anything like killing people. Is that so? Thin old man indifferently said, A knight who has been deprived of his identity is not worthy to be called a knight. A knight's glory is upright. If I remember correctly, Vic likes to go to places like the Moulin Rouge to enjoy singing and dancing. Is this the behavior of a knight? Alex was stunned for a moment. Then he gritted his teeth and said, But he would never kill a deacon of the magistrate. This is definitely a conspiracy, a trap. Don't speak if there is no evidence. Thin old man coldly glanced at him. Both of them were almost the same age. He naturally didn't need to give the other a good face. Who said that there is no evidence? Abel, who was silent, suddenly stood up. He stood up and said in a cold voice, Our Milan family has arrested the murderer. He is now being sent here for punishment. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone present was stunned, and they looked at the thin old man. The skinny old man's first reaction was to darken his face. Even the magistrate couldn't catch the murderer. So how could a mere noble catch the murderer? He naturally didn't believe it. Even if the murderer was caught, it would be a slap in the face for the magistrate, which would be even more embarrassing. He coldly said, Catch the murderer? Is there any evidence? Of course, and he has confessed. Abel said. Old Feline whispered to Dudian, They have found a scapegoat. Chapter 200. The skinny old man's face was cold. I need to remind you that impersonating a criminal will be dealt with as a crime of covering up. We will severely investigate this. Abel's eyelids twitched slightly. He calmly said, "When we caught this man, we accidentally found out through torture that he confessed to us. As for the details, we need to ask the magistrate to confirm it. However, the Mill family will never protect any criminal." Hearing his cunning answer, the skinny old man snorted and didn't say anything more. A moment later, the real culprit was brought into the court. It was a middle-aged man. He was escorted by 2 knights of the magistrate and a senior priest to the court. He bowed his head and looked at his toes all the way. The senior priest slightly bowed to the skinny old man and said, "The basic information has been verified. He confessed that he killed Deacon Huey's wife and Deacon Huey." The skinny old man indifferently said, "Evidence." "Yes." The senior priest slightly nodded and shook a roll of information in his hand. The criminal Nolte, 36 years old this year. He was a knight of the Fight family. He didn't get the Medal of Honor from the Knight's Hall. His wife died 5 years ago due to the bubonic plague. Only his daughter was left. He paused a little and continued. Nolte confessed to the crime process. He admitted that he killed Deacon Huey in the rainy night. The motive was revenge. 5 years ago, Deacon Huey's carriage almost hit his critically ill wife. Nolte blamed the death of his wife on Deacon Huey. So he secretly investigated Deacon Huey's whereabouts and waited for an opportunity to retaliate. After killing Deacon Huey, he hated his wife. So he sneaked into Deacon Huey's house again and killed his wife. The senior priest said to the skinny old man, "The evidence is that several steel nails were found in his house. They were the same as the murder weapon that pierced Deacon Huey's chest. They were stained with dried blood. In addition, according to other acquaintances of Nolte, Nolte has a serious dog abuse habit. The dog blood on the steel nails was stained by Nolte when he killed stray dogs." The skinny old man's face darkened. As someone who had handled hundreds of cases, his first instinct told him that this was a noble impersonation crime. Otherwise, with their investigation power, they would have found out long ago that an ordinary knight had committed the crime. "Dear priest, now that the evidence is conclusive and the criminal is here, shouldn't you release my child?" Abel said in a humble tone. The thin old man coldly looked at him and said to the senior cleric below, "How does he explain the bracelet left at the scene?" The priest looked at the middle-aged knight. He said that he found this bracelet on the street in front of the Moulin Rouge. "Are you saying that the dancer lady is lying?" The skinny elder snorted and said, "Let her come up." Soon, the dancer with the white cat mask came to the court. Her face was a little pale. She looked at Abel and the others timidly, then looked at the skinny old man and said, "Sir, I don't remember what happened that day. Maybe I dropped it on the road before I went to work." The skinny elder narrowed his eyes and said, "You may leave." The dancer was taken away. Alex held his crutch and said in a cold voice, "Now that the truth is out, I hope the magistrate can deal with it fairly." The skinny old man slightly frowned and whispered to the 2 people next to him. At this time, 2 figures suddenly entered the court. It was Timothy and the sword-scar youth. Timothy said to the skinny old man, "Sir, please allow us to interrogate the criminal." The skinny old man saw her come forward and nodded. "Okay, I will give you 15 minutes to investigate." "No," Abel hurriedly said with a sullen face. "This is not in line with the rules. Now that the truth is out and the criminal has confessed, what else do you want to investigate? It's not your turn to interfere in a magistrate's affairs." Timothy looked at him and said coldly, "You." Abel glared at her. "Don't be rude." The skinny old man immediately criticized Timothy and said, "Take him away." Then he said to Abel, "There's a lot of evidence in this case. We need to take him to confirm one by one." Abel's face turned ugly as he looked at the middle-aged man who was dragged away by Timothy. His fingers were tightly clenched in his sleeves. Old Feline looked at the changes in the court. He lowered his voice and said to Dudian, "It seems that the magistrate has determined that Vic is the murderer. The two disciplinary officers will take away the scapegoat. They will torture him to get a confession. This time the magistrate is serious. Dean calmly said, "How can they not worry about their own safety in the future if a deacon can be easily blamed for the assassination?" Old Feline was startled as he looked at the three deacon-level priests. There was a bitter smile on his face. After a moment, Timothy and the sword-scar youth came back. They carried the middle-aged man who was trembling all over. The middle-aged man wasn't injured, but his head was full of cold sweat. His body was gently trembling. Reporting to the high priest, after investigation, it has been proven that this person is lying. Timothy bowed slightly. The skinny old man's eyes lit up. "Please elaborate." "Yes." Timothy nodded and turned to the crowd. After the investigation, the man personally admitted that he was hired to be the scapegoat. He will be released on bail soon after he is imprisoned. Moreover, he will get a lot of money. That's why he is willing to do this. Abel and Alex, as well as Vic, who was in the field, sighed in relief. Their complexion changed and became somewhat ugly. The thin old man heaved a sigh of relief and asked who hired him. Timothy looked at Abel and others. He said that he didn't know the name and appearance of the other party. Old Feline was startled. The expectation in his eyes turned into regret. He whispered, "The Mill family has prepared card. Their mind is very meticulous." Dean nodded. There was a bit of regret in his heart. If the middle-aged man pointed out that it was the Mill family, then it would be a heavy blow to the Mill family. Obviously, the Mill family had expected this and didn't treat it carelessly. The thin old man glanced at Alex and said, "Now that the matter has been investigated clearly, I sentence Mill family's Vic Mill to assassinate Deacon Huey and his wife. He has violated the law." Chapter 3, Article 28 of the crime of murder. He is sentenced to death with 1 year reprieve. Once the reprieve is over, he will be executed. He will be imprisoned in Thornflower Prison. After he finished speaking, the ruler fell down. The crisp sound of the ruler was like a slap to Abel and the others' faces. For a moment, they were stunned. They couldn't believe that the magistrate was so decisive. Vic's mind went blank. He looked at his father and grandfather in the stands. They had lost their souls and had an ugly expression on their faces. His heart sank. He rushed out of his seat and roared, "I'm not guilty. I'm not guilty. I'm innocent. You bastards can't distinguish right from wrong." Pa! The roar came to an abrupt end. It was Timothy who had slapped him in the face. The heavy force made him fall to the ground. His brain buzzed. Timothy snorted coldly and waved his hand. "Take him away." 2 knights of the magistrate immediately came over and grabbed Vic's shoulders. They escorted him out of the courtroom through the passage. It's finally over. Old Feline was relieved. He felt tired. Dean looked at Vic's back. There was a faint smile on his face. "I hope he can take care of his body." Old Feline looked at him and laughed. "You have a little sympathy." Dean smiled. "It's my turn to clear my name." Old Feline nodded. "I will support you." Dean smiled. Chapter 201. Alex, Abel, and others looked at Vic being taken away. In just 2 days, they had tried their best to mobilize all their connections. But in the end, they were unable to change the verdict. Abel's eyes fell on the middle-aged man who was still trembling in front of the courtroom. There was a trace of coldness in his eyes. He said to Alex, "Father, don't worry. I will use my connections to bail him out as soon as possible." Alex sat down with his crutches. He seemed to have aged a lot. He slowly shook his head and said in a low voice, "It's useless. His crime is to assassinate a deacon of the magistrate. Even if he is bailed out, he can't see the light of day. Otherwise, the magistrate will try to find a way to execute him as soon as possible." Hearing his words, Abel slightly clenched his fist. How could he not know this? However, he only had one son, and he had painstakingly cultivated him until now. He had always been training him to be the next chief of the Milan tribe. Now that he had ended up like this, how could he just accept it? At this time, the thin old man in the courtroom coughed. The second bill is about to be read. This is about the Milan family's Longshan ruby theft case. Mr. Dean, please come out. Alex, Abel, and others were about to leave. They were startled when they heard the thin, old man's words. Longshan ruby theft case? When did their family's ruby get stolen? How come I didn't know about it? The Longshan ruby was stolen? Alex looked at Abel. Was it a disaster that never came alone? Abel shook his head. No. Suddenly he thought of something. It was a trivial matter from 3 years ago. He had almost forgotten about it. At this time, he saw Dean, who was passing by the aisle. The latter had a smile on his face. His pace was calm, as if he was entering a grand banquet. It's him? Alex was stunned when he saw Dean. He had a little impression of the talkative teenager. He looked at Abel. What's going on? Rudolph was ready to marry our family, but his daughter fell in love with a civilian hunter boy. Rudolph didn't want to break up the relationship with his daughter, so he asked me to cooperate with him. He said that our family's Longshan ruby was stolen by the boy. Then he would ask the magistrate to help him decide the case and throw the boy to Thornflower Prison. He would be executed after a few years. Dudian looked at Dudian's back thoughtfully and whispered, "This is an old thing that happened 3 years ago. At that time, Burong family's daughter had reached the age of marriage. Rudolph was ready to marry our family, but his daughter fell in love with a civilian hunter boy. Rudolph didn't want to break up the relationship with his daughter, so he asked me to cooperate with him. He said that our family's Longshan ruby was stolen by the boy." Alex was slightly startled. He rarely asked about the family's affairs. He couldn't help but ask, "In that case, why didn't Rudolph's daughter marry into our family? Is it because she doesn't believe you?" Abel sighed. She believed Rudolph's words. In order to make her completely believe in Rudolph's words, we specially asked Deacon Huey's student to ask for Deacon Huey's verdict. In this way, no one will doubt the verdict given by the reputation of a deacon of magistrate. But I didn't think that his daughter would be so stubborn. Once she decided on something, no one could persuade her. She proposed marriage several times, but she didn't agree. She just wanted to be a magistrate and didn't want to get married. Alex snorted. It's all an excuse. Rudolph's daughter has a big temper. Such a girl is not worthy of Wei. He looked up at Dean. Was he bailed out? Who has the guts to bail out the person we want to deal with? Scott Consortium? Abel shook his head. It's a small aristocratic family in the consortium. Ryan family. Alex's eyes flashed. I didn't expect it to be them. They used to be a glorious family, but now they have declined. They haven't learned their lesson. Their hair hasn't healed yet. Do they want to cultivate claws? The thin old man looked down at Dean. The reason for your complaint is that you were wronged. Do you have any evidence to prove it? Dean nodded. They said that I stole the Dragon Mountain ruby from the Milan family. According to me, the Dragon Mountain ruby of the Milan family has always been guarded by knights. I was just a rookie hunter. Moreover, I was sent by the consortium to perform a task outside the giant wall. So it's impossible that I did it. If you go to investigate, there are a lot of people in the consortium who can prove it. Moreover, there are records of my residence and medical examination. It's enough to prove that I was outside the giant wall at that time. The skinny elder nodded and said, Is that so? Let me see. After that, he waved to a knight of the magistrate next to him. Show me the evidence of their investigation. The knight nodded and left. A moment later, he brought back a roll of information. The thin old man used a magnifying glass to look at the information. He slowly nodded. Yes, we have asked the guardian of the giant wall. We have also investigated the people who went with you to the giant wall. You were indeed outside the giant wall. Abel's face sank as he heard the words of the thin old man. He got up and said, Magistrate, even if he was outside the giant wall, there is no way to prove that he didn't steal it. We found it in his residence. The evidence is conclusive. The thin old man looked at him. So, he stole it when he went outside the giant wall. Abel was non-committal and did not answer directly. Dean sneered. Patriarch Abel said that I stole your family's ruby. I was just a junior hunter at that time. How could I steal the ruby that you were guarding? As far as I know, there wasn't any news about your family's ruby before I went outside the giant wall. Was there any news in the newspapers at that time? There shouldn't be. If you investigate the various news agencies, you should know that your family has never published any news about the loss of your family's ruby. Abel's face slightly changed. Indeed, Dean was just a small character. They didn't plan to frame him because they didn't want to give him any opportunity to be interrogated. The verdict given by Deacon Huey was enough to prove everything. Now that a few years had passed, they had long forgotten about it. As for Dean being bailed out of prison, he didn't pay attention to it. Maybe the Bourong family had paid attention to it, but after 3 years, it was difficult to repair the loopholes of 3 years ago. As Dean said, they would know that the newspapers 3 years ago didn't have any news about them losing the ruby. We found it. Naturally, we won't publish in the newspapers. Abel insisted. Dean sneered. Found it? How long did it take you to find it? If I was outside the giant wall, I would have to spend 7 days in the security office in addition to the time to perform the task. How many days did you find it? Abel's face was gloomy. It was the first time he saw Dean. For him, this person was just a small character on the paper. Now that they were face to face, he found that this boy was a bit unusual. I don't remember exactly which day it was, but it should have been found soon. Abel's answer was very clever. He didn't give a clear number. He didn't want Dean to find the relevant people to investigate the loopholes. You forgot, but someone remembered. Dean sneered. You said that you found it in my house? The people who went to search for it can ask about the situation. You said that I stole it? Every night, who guarded the ruby is my witness. You said that I am a sinner, but someone in the security office saw me. I was directly escorted to a cell and then transferred to the Thornflower prison. They didn't interrogate me. Abel's face was ugly. These were indeed loopholes. They would be investigated by the magistrate. This case has been tried at that time. Your crime was decided by the deacon himself. Don't talk nonsense. Abel didn't give up. At worst, he would use money to shut the mouths of those people. In this critical period, he didn't want to carry more negative reputation. Dean saw that the old man threw all the responsibility to the magistrate. His face was cold. The deacon of the magistrate judged me based on the evidence. But you forged the evidence to slander me. The skinny old man thought that Dudian would denounce the magistrate's arbitrary judgment. He didn't expect that Dudian would say such words. He could not help but nod slightly. In fact, he had seen too many such cases when he was a student. The aristocracy liked to use a few tricks. Although he didn't interrogate Dudian, but he also believed that Dudian was wronged. He didn't think that a junior hunter who had just reached the marriageable age 3 years ago could steal the Longshan ruby from the Milan family. If it was so easy, then the Longshan ruby would have been lost many times. How could it be kept until today? We will strictly review this matter and give you justice. The old man nodded. Abel's face slightly changed. He didn't say anything. He knew that in the current situation, continuing to argue would only lose his demeanor. Magistrate, we have investigated. At this time, a clear voice sounded. It was Timothy and the scar-faced youth who had returned. Timothy came to the side of Dean and said to the old man, "We have checked. This matter is indeed an injustice." At that time, Deacon Huey was busy and didn't seriously review the case. He gave such a case to a student to judge. Deacon Huey sealed his student's judgment. Due to a moment of negligence, he didn't carefully review the case. That's why such a thing happened. The old man understood, but his face didn't look very good. I'm afraid there is a misunderstanding. Deacon Huey's work attitude has always been serious and strict. Timothy opened her mouth and wanted to say something. The scar-faced youth next to her secretly pulled her sleeve and gave her a wink. Timothy immediately understood his meaning. Her face slightly changed. She bowed her head and said, "Yes, but the main reason is the Milan family slander. They forged evidence to frame others." The old man nodded slightly and said to Abel, "I need you to give me an explanation for this matter." Abel didn't think that the disciplinary judge would intervene in such a small case. His face changed. He couldn't continue to cover it up. Even if he spent money, he wouldn't be able to cover it up. He thought for a moment and said, "There may be a misunderstanding in this matter. I'm really sorry for bringing trouble to Mr. Dean." Dean's eyes turned cold. "Do you think an apology can solve it?" The skinny old man looked at him and said to Abel, "I will carefully review this matter again and convict him another day. But before that, Your Milan family must give some compensation to Mr. Dean. After all, this matter is caused by your Milan family. Dean's face slightly changed. Listening to the old man's words, it seemed that the old man didn't intend to pursue this matter further. Suddenly, he understood that the Milan family was a noble family. The nature of this matter was completely different from Deacon Huey's assassination case. The Milan family could casually find someone to take the blame. It was impossible for them to spend a lot of resources to investigate such a case. Finding evidence of Abel's plan and then convicting Abel and putting him in prison was equivalent to destroying an aristocratic family. He was just a small character. It was not worth for them to spend so much energy to fight with an aristocratic family. He was silent, fair, and just. Sure enough, he still had to rely on his own hands. Chapter 202. Hearing the words of the skinny old man, Abel immediately understood his thoughts. He immediately said, "What the priest said is right. This matter must be thoroughly investigated. Before that, I will give Mr. Dean 100 gold coins as compensation on behalf of the Milan family. I hope this can make up for Mr. Dean's loss." 100 gold coins? Dean was about to give up for the time being. He raised his eyebrows. 100 gold coins can make up for 3 years of imprisonment in Thornflower Prison? Can it make up for 3 years of losses? Can it make up for my damaged reputation? Abel's eyes flashed. What kind of reputation does a little hunter have? But his face remained calm. Since Mr. Dean is not satisfied, you can say a compensation method. I'll listen to it. Dean sneered. I don't need to say it. I'll settle the account with you. When I entered the prison, I was a junior hunter. How much gold coins does a junior hunter earn every year? A junior hunter was sentenced to prison and almost died in prison. How much should I compensate? 100 gold coins? Do you think you are dealing with the homeless in the slums? You call this shabby gift compensation? Abel's face sank. Don't be too greedy. This matter hasn't been thoroughly investigated. You're still a suspect. Is that so? Dean indifferently said, then thoroughly investigate. If the magistrate intervenes in the investigation, I believe you can find out a lot of things, right? Hearing the implied meaning of Dean's words, the cold light in Abel's eyes became colder. His eyes quickly glanced at Timothy and the sword-scar youth. Both of them didn't open their mouth and remained silent. Abel understood that they naturally wouldn't say in public that they wouldn't intervene in this case. So their silence seemed to be acquiescence. Dean was taking the opportunity to use them to pressure him. Even if you don't say it, the magistrate will thoroughly investigate. Abel thought for a moment and said in a cold voice, "This compensation is our goodwill. Since you think it is too little, then I will give you 10 times more. 1,000 gold coins. So much money is enough for you to live the rest of your life without worries." Dean looked at him cynically. The patriarch of the Milan family doesn't know how to calculate. In that case, I will calculate it for you. An ordinary junior hunter will get extra gold coins every time he performs a task. In addition to the money from the sale of hunting materials, he will also complete the task assigned by the consortium to collect materials. He needs to go outside the giant wall 6 times a year. The income varies from the lowest 500 gold coins to the highest 100,000 gold coins. If he is lucky, he can hunt a young monster and earn at least tens of thousands of gold coins. It is possible to earn 100,000 gold coins in 3 years. Even if it's the lowest income, it's 1,500 gold coins for 3 years. That's the lowest. Isn't it ridiculous for you to give me 1,000 gold coins? Abel's face flashed with anger. Pay attention to your words. Little civilian, how dare you talk to me like this? Dean sneered. Patriarch Abel, please note that this is the court of judgment. According to the regulations of a magistrate, there is no distinction between nobles and civilians in the court of judgment. There is only distinction between criminals and non-criminals. Dean sneered. Patriarch Abel, please pay attention. This is the judgment court. According to the regulations of a magistrate, there is no distinction between nobles and civilians. There is only distinction between crimes and non-crimes. 5,000 gold coins? Dean's heart was filled with killing intent. 5,000 gold coins? Patriarch Abel, what I said is the annual income of an ordinary junior hunter. It doesn't mean that it is my annual income. My magic marks are rare monsters. Even if I am just a junior hunter, my role in the team can't be ignored. 5,000 gold coins? I'm not exaggerating, but it is not even a fraction of my annual income. Abel stared at him. Mr. Dean, don't take advantage of the opportunity to blackmail me. Dean narrowed his eyes and said, Blackmail? Patriarch Abel, do you want to bet with me? Let's bet on the amount of money I will earn from hunting outside the giant wall in the future. Abel's eyes were cold. Really? Since you are so confident, I will bet with you. But the premise is that it must be effective within 3 years. If you delay for more than 10 years and go outside the giant wall, then your strength will be stronger and your hunting efficiency will be higher. Dean's mouth curled up. Well, since we're going to bet, let's make a big bet. If I win, your family's Dragon Mountain rubies will belong to me. How about it? Abel was startled and said resolutely, No. If he used the Dragon Mountain rubies as a bet, then he was worried that other consortia would get the news and secretly help Dean. As a result, he would lose. All right. The thin old man interrupted the argument between the two. In my opinion, since Mr. Dean has been imprisoned for 3 years in Thornflower Prison as a hunter, then according to 10,000 gold coins per year, he should compensate 30,000 gold coins. Dean frowned. 30,000 gold coins? It was still not enough to reach his goal. Just when Abel was about to say something, Alex, who was next to him, slowly said, That's it. Let's call it a day. 30,000 it is. I'm just afraid that he won't be able to use it. After saying that, he stood up with the help of his walking stick, turned around, and led the way. Abel's eyes were gloomy. He looked at Dean, but didn't say anything. He turned away and left the courtroom. The trial was over. Everyone dispersed. Dean looked at Timothy and the scar-faced youth. Thank you for helping me. Timothy indifferently said, Justice doesn't need to be thanked. Then he turned and left. The scar-faced youth glanced at Dudian, then followed Timothy to leave. Dean watched them disappear into the passage. He turned and came to Old Feline. Let's go back. Old Feline slowly sighed. You scared me a moment ago. 5,000 gold coins is a lot. I didn't expect that it would be 30,000 gold coins. Although this amount of money is not worth mentioning for the Milan family. But for us, it is a huge sum of money. We are one step closer to the 100,000 gold coins we need to rent the passage outside the giant wall. Dean's eyes lit up. Let's go back and talk about it. The money from the factory should be recovered soon. Feline nodded. Dean helped Old Feline out of the magistrate. They sat in the carriage of the Ryan family and went back to the Ryan castle. Everyone in the castle came to see Dean when they heard the news. They were excited when they heard the huge compensation of 30,000 gold coins. They felt that the good days were coming. They naturally didn't know that the money wouldn't be used for their lives. Chapter 203. Huss Avenue, in front of the magistrate. A carriage with the flag of Blonde came slowly and stopped in front of the steps of the door. The door was pushed open, and Jenny got out of the carriage. She was dressed in a formal priest's robe, and her hair was tied up in the priest's white top hat. She walked up the steps and entered the court. When she reached the hall on the second floor where the official priest worked, she immediately saw that her colleagues had already arrived and were handling daily cases in their respective seats. Hey, Miss Jenny. Someone saw Jenny and was surprised. I heard you were sick. Are you feeling better? Jenny was a little ashamed. This was the reason her father gave her. She replied, I'm better. I'm sorry to make everyone worry. That's good. Jenny, good morning. The others also saw Jenny and greeted her. Jenny responded to them one by one. Suddenly, she saw several colleagues gathered in front of another seat, whispering something. She stepped forward and asked, What's the big case recently? They were chatting happily. When they heard Jenny's words, they noticed her and exclaimed, You came to work? Today. Jenny curiously looked at them and said, Are you discussing a big case? One of the young priests shook his head and said, We don't have any big cases in the Puss District. We're talking about the Terra District Magistrate. Haven't you heard that Deacon Huey was assassinated? His murderer has finally been found. It turned out to be a young master of the Milan family. Do you think these nobles are? Suddenly, he remembered that Jenny was also a noble. Moreover, she was an upper-class noble, so he immediately shut his mouth. When Jenny heard his words, her eyes widened and said, Deacon Huey was assassinated, and it was done by the Milan family? How is it possible? Why would they assassinate Deacon Huey? I don't know. Another young female clergyman shook her head and said, It is said that Deacon Huey helped the Milan family with some shameful cases. The Milan family was worried that Deacon Huey would be exposed and affect their family, so they secretly assassinated him. Jenny was startled. Deacon Huey has handled so many cases. He is fair and strict. How could he help the Milan family? This, the Terra District Magistrate has already decided. The young man from before shrugged and said, I guess he couldn't resist the temptation of money. After all, the deacon is also a human and needs money. When Jenny heard his words, her heart felt stifled. She couldn't help but say, Is money really that important? When we became priests, didn't we have to punish evil and uphold justice? The young girl looked at her and said, You are a nobleman. You have never lacked money since you were a child. Naturally, you can't feel the charm of money. At this point, she saw the young man next to her winked at her and immediately stopped talking. They looked at each other. The young man said, I still have a case to deal with, so I will go first. After that, he turned around and returned to his seat. The rest of them also dispersed. Jenny's expression was ugly. She bit her lips tightly, as if the wall in her heart had been broken. She silently returned to her seat, but she couldn't muster up the slightest bit of enthusiasm for work. She lay on her desk, lost in thought. After a long time, she recovered a little. She glanced at the newspaper on a colleague's desk. She stepped forward and said, Let me borrow your newspaper. The colleague saw her and smiled. Take it. Jenny thanked him in a low voice and took the newspapers. She returned to her seat and began to flip through them. Deacon Huey assassinated the real culprit. Vic Milan is in prison. Who will be the future successor of the Milan family? Jenny's fingers trembled as she read the headlines of the newspaper. She didn't believe that it was true. She didn't expect that the murderer turned out to be Vic, who had repeatedly proposed marriage to her in the past few years. She couldn't help but think of the handsome youth's face. He had pursued her many times in the past 3 years. Although she didn't have the idea of marrying him, she had a good impression of him. She didn't expect that such a promising and elegant noble knight would do such a heinous thing. Killed Huey's wife. Jenny read the following report. There was some pain in her heart. Her father often said that you can't know a person's face. Even an honorary knight of the Knight's Hall would do such a cruel thing. She gripped the newspaper tightly. Suddenly, in the folds of the newspaper, she accidentally saw a word. With just a glance, her heart inexplicably beat faster. She looked at it intently. At the bottom of the newspaper, in an inconspicuous corner, there was a report written, Milan family didn't lose the Longshan ruby. It was a family misunderstanding. The magistrate has ruled that Dean is innocent. At present, the Milan family has given 30,000 gold coins as compensation. Looking at the records on it, Jenny felt her mind go blank and her mind buzz. After a long time, she came back to her senses and looked at it again. She read it 3 times in a row to confirm that she did not see wrongly. Wronged? He was wronged. Jenny muttered to herself, her fingers trembling slightly. She couldn't help but recall the boy's heartbroken and desperate gaze and his unrepentant stubbornness when she parted from him in that gloomy prison 3 years ago. I'm not guilty. Why should I admit it? I'm not guilty. These words echoed in her ears as if it was yesterday. She could vaguely feel the grief and indignation. He is really not guilty. Jenny's eyes were red. Tears fell from her eyes and soaked the newspaper. I wronged him. I didn't believe him. Her heart was in pain. It was as if she could feel how sad and desperate Dudian's mood was at that time. His desperate eyes were like a sharp knife stabbing into her chest. The pain was suffocating. In the Rhine castle, Dean and old Feline were sitting at the breakfast table and eating. Your report is so obscure. It doesn't mention the crimes of the Milan family and the imprisonment you received. Instead, it focuses on the compensation from the Milan family. Old Feline folded the newspaper and looked at it. He shook his head and sighed. It seems that the Milan family has spent a lot of money on it. Dean nodded. After yesterday's trial, all the newspapers in the city were reporting about the assassination case and the Milan family. It was like a storm. The reputation of the Milan family was severely hit. Moreover, this matter was a double-edged sword for the Milan family and the magistrate. Both sides suffered losses. However, the magistrate was lighter while the Milan family was heavier. As for the impact on the entire aristocratic class, it was negligible. Chapter 204. How was the sales of Scott Consortium's matches? Dudeen closed the newspaper and asked Old Feline. Old Feline said, after the last contract was signed, they have discussed the operation plan. They have promoted the role of the match in various industries in the commercial district and residential district. The effect of the match is really good. The only problem is that the consumption is too fast and the price is a bit expensive. The sales in the residential district didn't spread like wildfire, but in the commercial district, the sales performance is excellent. In just a few days, the reputation of the match has spread. The financial newspapers have been reporting about the match every day. They call it the magical ignition. Dudeen nodded. After all, the Scott Consortium was an old consortium that could compete with the Mellon Consortium. They had fully expanded the market value of matches. In a short period of time, even if other consortia found alchemists to deconstruct the composition of matches and wanted to make new ones to sell, the sales volume wouldn't be able to be compared with the Scott Consortium. At most, they would be able to seize 10 to 20% of the market share. How much money can we get? Dudeen asked. This was the most important question. Old Feline laughed. The first month's sales haven't been calculated yet. I estimate that it will be at least 1,000 gold coins per month. Dudeen nodded. The price of matches was cheap. It was extremely good that they could get thousands of gold coins per month. It was a sky-high price that ordinary residents couldn't earn in their lifetime. Including the textile mill's money and your compensation, it is estimated that we can accumulate 100,000 gold coins in half a year. That's enough to rent the passage outside the giant wall. Old Feline laughed. Once the passage outside the giant wall was rented, the door to wealth would be completely opened. At that time, he would be able to cultivate scavengers. Dudeen would clean up the area for the scavengers to pick up. Once the accumulated funds were sufficient, he would be able to recruit more hunters. The gold coins would be like a rolling snowball. Dudeen slightly nodded, but there was some sigh in his heart. Half a year was too long. However, he could use this time to train himself. He had learned hunting skills 3 years ago, but now he was unfamiliar with them. He had to upgrade his skills to the level of an intermediate hunter as soon as possible. Otherwise, it would be too disadvantageous for him to rely on his own strength to hunt. Bourong family, second floor of the manor. Rudolph sat on the balcony after breakfast. The maid gently massaged his shoulders. He crossed his legs as he read the newspapers from various news agencies. It was like a childhood lesson. Rudolph had to do it every day. Someone framed the Milan Consortium. I don't know who the real murderer is, Rudolph thought as he read the newspaper. He believed that the Milan family wouldn't be stupid enough to assassinate a deacon of the magistrate, unless there was a secret that he didn't know. Master, outside, the housekeeper quickly walked in and said, just now, the people sent to keep an eye on the young lady replied. Not long after the young lady arrived at the court, she took a car and left the court alone. No colleagues followed her. Rudolph frowned. Where did he go? I'm not sure yet. The butler shook his head and said, head towards the west. Western District? Rudolph frowned as he thought for a moment. Suddenly, he thought of something. Prepare a carriage and go to the Rhine Castle to pick up Mississippi. If she resists, then bring her back by force. The butler was startled. He quickly nodded and said, yes. He turned and left in a hurry. Troublesome brat. Rudolph's face was gloomy as he asked the maid to bring him a cup of hot coffee. In the Ryan Castle on the training ground. This training ground was used for the daily training of the knights and squires of the Ryan Castle. But now it was Dean's training ground. Dean had come to the training ground to train. His arm had been pierced by a steel nail. After a period of recuperation, it had almost healed. He asked the waiter to adjust the target position. He kept pulling the bow and shooting. Every arrow hit the bull's eye. Some knights and squires who were on vacation had come to the training ground to watch Dean's training. They were curious about the hunters who were going to fight outside the giant wall. At the moment when they saw Dean's archery skills, there was a burst of cheers. Dean wasn't affected by the cheers. He was concentrating on the bull's eye. He felt the trajectory of the arrow as he shot. In addition, he had asked the butler to help him make 2 bundles of spiral arrows. The arrowheads were made of lead and had high density. They were heavier than iron arrowheads. They could shoot farther, and the destructive power was more amazing. Although it was the era of cold weapons, but the skills were extremely complex. It didn't mean that one's arm strength was strong enough to pull the bow and shoot farther. The weight of the bow and the bowstring, as well as the arrows, all had a vital impact on the accuracy and distance. Suddenly, a waiter came to Dean's side as Dean was repeatedly practicing. "Mr. Dean, someone is looking for you." "Who?" Dean didn't stop. "It's Miss Jenny from the Bourong family," the waiter said. Dean loosened his fingers, and the arrow pierced through the air. It was nailed to the target. The tip of the arrow shook violently. After a moment of silence, Dean slowly put down the bow and said, "Say you don't want to see her." The waiter was surprised. Jenny was the daughter of the Bourong family. Everyone knew how terrifying the power of the Bourong family was. How could the daughter of the Bourong family be refused? However, he nodded and left. After all, he was carrying the rice bowl of the Ryan family. Naturally, he had to listen to the words of the Ryan family. After the waiter left, Dean put down the bow and picked up the arrow. His fingers gently rubbed the arrowhead. After a moment, the waiter returned and said to Dean, "Mr. Dean, she said that you don't want to see her. She has been waiting outside until you see her." Dean slightly frowned. His face was slightly cold. He put down the arrow and turned to leave the training ground. All the way to the gate, Dean saw the carriage parked on the hillside outside the manor. There was a girl in formal dress standing in front of the carriage. She was tiptoeing as she saw Dean coming to the door. There was a bit of joy on her face. Dean looked at the girl from afar. After 3 years, the girl had faded a little bit of the original girl. There was a bit of a young girl's aura. The outline of her cheeks was vaguely like before. She was more beautiful and moving. He stared at her for a moment and went straight to the carriage. After 3 years, Jenny saw Dean again. The boy from 3 years ago was now tall and thin. His body was straight and his appearance was more handsome. However, the lines on his face were a bit more indifferent. His pair of black eyes were like the stars in the dark. She looked at Dean step by step. Her mood was complex. She felt guilty, sad, and self-blame. "I'm sorry." Her eyes were red as she saw Dean coming closer. She whispered, "I read the newspaper. You were wronged. I'm sorry." She knew how much damage she had caused to the boy. No words could make up for it. Dean quietly looked at her. After a moment of silence, he shook his head. "I don't blame you for this. Now that things have passed, the past won't come together. I have received your apology. From now on, we don't owe each other anything." Chapter 205. Tears flowed out of Jenny's eyes as she heard Dean's cold words. She clenched the clothes on her chest and said in a sobbing voice, "I know that you can't forgive me for the harm I caused to you. I can't forgive myself either, but I hope that I can make it up to you. I'll use all my time to make it up to you. Please give me a chance, okay?" Dean silently looked at the girl who was standing in front of him with tears streaming down her face. Her face was full of pain. The pity on her face would make anyone feel heartbroken. He was silent for a long time and slowly said, "There are some things that can't be made up for. There is no need to make up for it. The past is the past. It's not your fault. I know you, so I don't hate you. It's just that you don't know me very well." At this point, he paused and slowly said, "From now on, I hope you can live your own life well. Take care of each other." "No." Jenny saw that Dean was about to turn back. She hurriedly stepped forward and pulled Dean's arm. "I know that I did wrong. Don't you even want to give me a chance to make it up to me? We used to be so happy together. We have the same ideals." We stopped. Suddenly, an angry shout came from the distance. They saw a carriage coming from the hillside. A middle-aged butler wearing a tall hat was standing in the carriage. He was angrily pointing at the position where Dean and Jenny were standing. Dean's eyes were cold. He twisted his wrist and broke away from Jenny's hand. He looked at the carriage coming over. "Smelly boy, get away from me. Don't get close to our miss." The middle-aged butler hurriedly jumped out of the carriage and shouted, "Uncle." Jenny wiped her tears and hurriedly said, "How can you talk like that?" The middle-aged butler was worried. He looked at her and said, "It didn't do anything to you, right? Uncle, don't talk nonsense." "He's not what you think," Jenny hurriedly said. The middle-aged butler stopped in front of her and angrily stared at Dean. "Boy, if you dare to get close to our miss again, I'll break your legs." Dean's indifferent face flashed a trace of coldness. "Don't use the lines you use to intimidate ordinary people on me. If you speak rudely again, I will break your legs now." Hearing Dean's words, the middle-aged butler choked for a moment and then flew into a rage. But when he saw the chill in Dean's eyes, he suddenly remembered that Dean was a hunter with an eccentric temperament. It would be easy for him to break his legs, and he also had the courage to do so. His face was ugly. He stopped looking at Dean and pulled Jenny. "Miss, let's go back. Master asked me to pick you up." "No, I won't go back." Jenny was shocked and angry, breaking away from his hand. The middle-aged butler thought of Rudolph's words. He didn't care about etiquette as he grabbed Jenny's hand. "Miss, Master will send a knight to take you away if you don't go back. Let go of me. Let go of me." Jenny raised her other hand and hurriedly hit him, struggling to break free. However, how could her slender arm compare to the middle-aged butler's strength? Dean looked at the scene coldly. "You'd better let go of her." The middle-aged butler heard his words and looked at him in anger. "Boy, don't even think about bewitching our families, miss." Dean's eyes flashed, and his figure suddenly swayed. Bang! The middle-aged butler felt his arm go numb. He couldn't help but loosen his fingers. At the same time, there was a burst of pain in his chest. His body involuntarily flew out and sat on the ground. He screamed in pain. Jenny broke away from the butler's hand and saw Dean standing in front of her. She cried out in joy and quickly reached out to grab him. Dean raised his arm and blocked her hand. He didn't look at her, but coldly looked at the middle-aged butler who was constantly groaning in pain. "I will keep your leg. Go back and tell your master that I can let bygones be bygones. But if you provoke me in the future, no one will be able to protect your Bourong family." The middle-aged butler kept rubbing his buttocks. He was about to shout when he saw Dean's sword-like eyes. His heart shrank, and there was a bit of panic on his face. Dudian looked at Jenny and indifferently said, "From now on, I hope you won't bother me again. I'll be very grateful to you." Then he indifferently turned away and went back to the castle along the path of the manor. Jenny stared at his back. She felt as if time and space were pulled extremely far away. It was difficult to touch him again. Tears fell from her eyes, but she didn't notice it. Dean returned to the castle. Old Foulin dispersed the knights, squires, and his children who were lying in front of the window. He looked at the indifferent teenager in a complicated mood. He sighed. "Are you okay?" Dean silently shook his head. "Miss Jenny is a flower in a greenhouse. She doesn't understand the truth and cruelty of the world. You can't blame her." Old Foulin sighed. "I wouldn't agree if my daughter were to marry a hunter. No aristocrat would agree. You're still young, and there's a long way to go in the future. Once you become successful and have a status comparable to that of an aristocrat, you will be able to find a beautiful, kind, and virtuous girl." Dean looked up at him. "People have to pay the price if they want to be happy. Some people have to pay the price. Some people have to pay the price. Some people have to pay the price." There is no one in this world who is worthy of me giving up everything. I will give up my career, ambitions, pursuits, and even my dignity. I won't do such a stupid thing for the second time. Old Feline looked at him and sighed softly. You are still young. Don't talk like that. Everyone is living to pursue what they think will make them happy. Some are love, some are family, some are wealth, some are power. What I pursue is my family. I want my children to be able to pass on from generation to generation. I want the metal of the Ryan family to not fall into the dust. For this, I am willing to give up everything and give up everything. Dean stared at him. But some things don't mean that you can get them. People's hearts are the most difficult to predict. As for wealth and power, as long as you are willing to give up everything, you can get them. Chapter 206. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. In the past few days, the Ryan castle was restored to its former tranquility. Everything was carried out in an orderly manner. 3 days ago, Miss Jenny of the Bourong family came over. It alarmed the entire Ryan castle, but eventually she was taken back by her housekeeper. This matter was even known by other consortia. News agencies published it to speculate whether the Mellon Consortium and the New World Consortium had any cooperation. On the training ground, Dean was learning how to shoot spiral arrows. However, the starting point of the idea was good, but the actual practice was extremely difficult, especially after practicing with spiral arrows and then shooting with ordinary arrows. The accuracy would be greatly reduced. Although he could adjust it quickly, but it also meant that he couldn't freely switch between the two arrows on the battlefield. This was unacceptable to Dean. He knew that if he was given time and a lot of practice, he would be able to freely switch between the two arrows. But in the current situation, at most in half a year he would be able to raise enough gold coins to rent the passage outside the giant wall. Mastering a skill in such a short period of time was completely a pipe dream. Is the spiral arrow a wrong idea? Dean gradually had such doubts, but when he thought of the firearms, he was sure of his own idea. When the bullet is shot, it rotates. This originates from the spiral rifling inside the pistol. There should be a reason for this. If the bullet doesn't rotate, it will be subjected to air resistance friction and will continue to decelerate. Moreover, the bullet is petite, so it will rotate to stabilize the trajectory. The rotation is correct, but I can't always control the wind direction and lose control of the shot. Dean held the arrow and fell into contemplation. Suddenly, he saw the spiral pattern on the arrow. There was a slight difference in the proportion with the other. He could not help but be stunned. Is the spiral pattern not neat? He picked up the other forged arrows and looked at them. He found that there was more or less a slight imbalance in the proportion of the spiral pattern. Some places were slightly deeper and some were slightly wider. He suddenly woke up. This spiral arrow is not made by machinery, but artificially cast. It is inevitable that there will be slight deviations unless the spiral arrow is forged with the same proportion. But in this case, it needs a top blacksmith. Any profession that reached the pinnacle was extremely difficult to obtain, and a common profession like blacksmithing was no exception. It seems that I won't be able to practice spiral arrow for a while. Dean sighed and could only give up. He didn't have the mood to practice and returned to the castle. As soon as he returned, Old Feline found him and called him to his study room. Mellon Consortium finally made a move. Old Feline looked at Dudian after closing the door. Dean's eyes narrowed. What is it? Today, we received news from a few customers that our orders have been canceled. Old Feline said, they should have inquired about our new textile machine. Although they won't be able to imitate it for a while, but they will certainly prevent us from using it to make money and disrupt our economy. Dean slowly nodded. Since these orders have been breached, the deposit is ours. There was a smile on Old Feline's face. Yes, we listened to you and received a lot of orders. They have greatly exceeded our textile output. Although we will lose some money, but we can earn the deposit. However, they should soon send someone to inquire about the manufacturing method of the new textile machine. If we manufacture it, then it is equivalent to giving our golden eggs to other chicken nests. Dean's mouth curved. You don't have to worry about this matter. The new textile machine isn't something that any consortium can control independently. It's like a match. Sooner or later, it will spread to the 3 districts. Since we can't hide it, we will sell it to other consortiums. It will be like selling matches. We will earn ready money. Old Feline nodded. I have the same idea. I want to discuss it with you. Dean said, but if we want to sell it, the share can't be less than 30%. Of course, unless they are willing to pay 100,000 gold coins in one go. Old Feline knew that the new textile machine was their last card to make money. He said in a dignified tone, I will talk about it. 100,000 gold coins is the lowest price. If you replace the old textile machine with the same amount of money, then the speed of making money will reach an appalling level. They will certainly be willing to pay. Dean shook his head. The potential of the textile machine is unlimited, but the market is limited. If the textile output is too much, then the price will depreciate. Moreover, there is a limit to the demand within the giant wall. If the demand is met, then even the best textile machine is equivalent to scrap iron. So don't ask for too much, as long as it is not lower than the bottom line. Old Feline was startled for a moment. He said, if you didn't say it, then I would have ignored it. He couldn't help but feel lucky. Go and do it, Dean said. Melon Consortium's headquarters, the highest conference room. There were more than 20 figures sitting on the edge of a huge oval table in the conference hall. Some of them were young, some of them were gray-haired, some of them were unruly leaning on the back of the chair, and some of them were meticulously and modestly sitting upright. 2 figures entered the conference room. One was a middle-aged man, and the other was an old man. Their clothes were embroidered with family badges. They were Mel family and Bourong family. Everyone. Rudolph looked around at the crowd. Today, Mr. George and I have called everyone here because the consortium is preparing to launch a new invention. This is a new type of textile machine. It will greatly increase the textile output. I hope that everyone will promote it in their own industries after the launch. We need to seize all the markets as soon as possible. Rudolph looked at the crowd. That's right. Everyone looked at each other as they heard his words. One of them, an old man with a crooked back, said in a hoarse voice, New textile machine? As far as I know, there hasn't been a new improvement in the textile machine for many years. Mr. Rudolph, how much can this new textile machine increase the textile output? Is it 1/3 or double? Rudolph looked at him and faintly smiled. There should be a 0 or even 10 zeros behind it. Everyone was surprised. George, who was next to him, smiled. This new textile machine can increase the textile output by 100 times or even 200 times. In theory, there is no upper limit. Chapter 207. 100 times? 200 times? Everyone was shocked by his words. They stared at George for a long time. A dignified lady couldn't help but ask, Mr. George, are you sure that such a textile machine exists? Yes. George looked at her and smiled. There is no doubt about the production efficiency of the new textile machine. I have contacted the 3 inventors of the Temple of Elements. They are building it in secret. What we need to consider now is how to quickly occupy the market and monopolize the textile industry before the other consortiums can react. Everyone looked at each other. Although they felt it was incredible, they still believed George's words. After all, it was meaningless to deceive them. One of the middle-aged men thought for a moment. We should contact the textile mills as soon as possible and receive all the orders as soon as possible. Yes, someone immediately agreed. I think the Temple of Elements should award us with the credit of the invention when the new textile machine is launched. The civilians will know that we invented it and will trust us. Another old man said. George looked at him and shook his head. The invention rights are not in our hands. Everyone was stunned as they looked at him in doubt. Recently, there has been a new consortium called New World Consortium. I believe you have heard of it. George slowly said, This new textile machine was invented by the New World Consortium. They should have submitted the invention application to the Temple of Elements. At present, we're the first to get the news about this new textile machine. Therefore, we must grab the market before the New World Consortium has the ability to swallow it. George slowly said. Everyone looked at each other as they heard this. There was a hint of understanding in their eyes. Mr. Rudolph, I heard that your daughter is very familiar with the New World Consortium. Isn't the New World Consortium in a cooperative relationship with us? A middle-aged man suddenly asked. Rudolph's face changed. My daughter has nothing to do with the New World Consortium. Don't be misled by the newspapers of other consortiums. He is a hunter recruited by the New World Consortium. He helped my daughter a little. My daughter went to visit him when she learned that he was released from prison. It's just a matter between two children. You don't need to think about it. The middle-aged man showed a look of understanding, but he shook his head and said, although it's a child's matter, our various consortiums are keeping an eye on each other. If the other consortiums mistakenly think that we are cooperating with the New World Financial Group, it will cause some adverse reactions. Rudolph frowned. His face was gloomy. Someone saw that the atmosphere was a bit stiff. Since we have no intention to cooperate with the New World Consortium, it is better to cut off their finances and completely collapse them. I don't know what old Feline is thinking. Does he want to lead the Ryan family back to the glory of the past? Old Feline is indeed greedy. What a pity. The others all had different attitudes. George said, the New World Consortium has received a lot of textile orders with the new textile machine. We have sent people to snatch these orders. They can only get some deposits at most. After we stabilize the market, we will slowly chew the New World Consortium. The Scott Financial Group has been keeping a close eye on us. If we promote it without restraint, it'll attract their attention, someone said. George said, that's why I've gathered all of you here to discuss how to deal with it. Ryan Castle. That night, the carriage arrived and entered the manor. Old Feline got off the carriage with the help of servants. He saw Dudian sitting in the hall and winked at him. Dudian nodded slightly. At the moment, everyone in the castle was waiting for Old Feline to come back for dinner. Old Feline took off his hat and coat. Old Feline and Dudian went back to his study after dinner. How is it? Dudian asked. Old Feline slowly sat down at the desk. There was a smile on his face. They agreed. Originally, they asked for 20%, but in the afternoon, they seemed to have received some news. So they loosened their mouth. Dudian was relieved. That's good. Didn't they propose to pay 100,000 gold coins? No. Old Feline shook his head. Even a big consortium like the Scott Financial Group would have to hold a board meeting to discuss about it. So they proposed a division. Moreover, they seemed to have considered the market saturation problem. So they didn't give too high a price. Tomorrow, they will send people to learn how to use it. I've given them the blueprints you gave me. I think they will start to manufacture it overnight. Dudian nodded. Time is money. If their intelligence is good enough, then they should know that the Melon Consortium is in control of it. Yes. Old Feline's face showed a fox-like smile. I intentionally or unintentionally revealed hints in this aspect during the negotiations. So they didn't have time to think about it. Today, they signed a contract on the spot. Dudian smiled. The older the ginger, the more spicier it is. How much initial capital did they give this time? 10,000 gold coins. Old Feline smiled. Including the compensation of 30,000 gold coins and the money earned from the shops in Yard Street and other small towns, as well as the textile orders we received, the total amount is close to 50,000 gold coins. Dudian nodded. It was almost the same as he had expected, although the matches were sold to the Scott Financial Group, but they would have to wait for the settlement of the property next month. As for the sales of the Ryan Castle shops, even if the business was booming, the amount of gold coins earned was very small. After all, there weren't many shops, and they were located in remote towns. Moreover, the matches were cheap, so they could only rely on small profits and long-term use to make money. It would take time to ferment. Now the shares of textiles and matches will come out next month. Let's see how much we can get next month. Dudian said. Old Feline laughed. According to my estimation, if the sales of the Scott family's property are good, we can raise the money in 3 months or at most half a year. Dudian sighed. He urgently needed to improve his strength in case the Melon family would send assassins again. Although the other senior hunter was a knight, but his combat ability was stronger than the assassins. Under the absolute power crushing, the assassins didn't need to wait until they were defenseless to sneak in and assassinate them. They only needed to find a time when there were fewer people. I'll leave these things to you. I should also practice my skills. Dudian said. His archery level was still at the primary hunter level. Unfortunately, the Ryan family was too poor. Now they were in the stage of saving money. They didn't have the money to hire a hunter instructor to guide them. Hunting skills were passed down by word of mouth. There were very few records and books. They could only spend a lot of money to hire an instructor. Leave it to me. Don't continue to be distracted. Old Feline said as he looked at Dudian with worry. Although they could rent the passage outside the giant wall soon, but Dudian was the only hunter in the family. If something happened outside the giant wall, the Ryan family would be completely finished. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.